Love podcasts, hate nonsense. It's the PoliticsJOE podcast, ladies and gentlemen. Lovely stuff. Lovely stuff. Live and direct.
Live and direct with an empty chair.
A cuck chair.
Well.
And actually, on the duct tape, it says Ed. So it's a cuck chair for Ed.
Unrelated. Richard Tice has got a question at PMQs today.
Unrelated. Lindsay Hoyle's been on his feet. Welcome, by the way, if you're watching along with us. We're live with you now from until the end of the budget, really. We're going to do PMQs. We're going to do the budget. We're going to watch along. We're looking forward to Starmer and Sunak, but Lindsay Hoyle is still on his feet. And I suspect what's probably happening here, Ava, is Lindsay Hoyle is whinging about possibly budget announcements made to the media rather than in the chamber. But once they get up and they start talking about, well, when they start doing PMQs, we'll cut to it. But for the time being,
we should tell them they can watch the entire thing here.
They can. You can watch the whole thing.
Yeah.
The whole thing.
All of PMQs.
All of PMQs. All of the budget. We'll start wittering.
Yeah.
As and when appropriate.
And we're going to talk about politics as well. We're not even going to just witter.
Yeah, there might be some political insight. Possibly.
Yeah.
We're going to go to PMQs.
Oh, we're going, aren't we?
All right. Well, let's go to PMQs then. See you in a bit.
To celebrate and focus on a brighter future. Last Diwali, the leader of the opposition and his family lit the deers outside 10 Downing Street. It was a significant moment in our national story. The first British Asian Prime Minister is a reminder that this is a country where people of every background can fulfil their dreams, and it makes us all proud to be British. Mr. Speaker, as you've just referenced, as this is our last exchange across the dispatch boxes, I wanted to take this opportunity to thank the Leader of the Opposition for his service. Now, of course, we've had political disagreements, ideological differences, we've argued at some length, but I want to thank him for his hard work, for his commitment, and for his decency in everything that he has done. And I too wish him and his family the very best for whatever the future may hold for them. Mr. Speaker, this morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others. In addition to my duties in this House, I shall have further such meetings later today.
Katrina Merrick.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to associate myself with the remarks made by the Prime Minister. Cumbernauld, in my constituency, was promised an elective and diagnostic treatment centre by the Scottish Government in 2021. This has continued to be delayed and is now alleged to be mothballed. What assurances can the Prime Minister give me that any Barney consequentials from today's budget are used to benefit my constituents and not be held on to by the Scottish Government?
Well, I thank my honourable friend for her question. I'm sorry to hear about the delays affecting her constituents. The party opposite oversaw years of mismanagement and chaos, and the impact on Scottish NHS is evident. This Labour government is committed to delivering for the Scottish people, including making sure that we have an NHS fit for the future. And the Chancellor will set out details in just a few moments.
Leader of the Opposition, Rishi Sunak.
Mr. Speaker, thank you for your kind words, and indeed thank you to the Prime Minister for his kind words. Indeed, no Prime Minister looks forward to PMQs, but I always did like this pre-budget one, because it was, for a change, nice not to be the main event and just the warm-up act. But as you said, Mr. Speaker, today is my last appearance at PMQs, and I'm happy to confirm reports that I will now be spending more time in the greatest place on earth, where the scenery is worthy. The scenery is indeed worthy of a movie set, and everyone is a character. That's right, Mr. Speaker. If anyone needs me, I will be in Yorkshire. So, and as an adopted Yorkshireman, I'm particularly looking forward to doing the coast-to-coast walk that runs through my constituency and many others. Since 2015, we've made significant progress with a campaign to make it a national trail, and indeed, Natural England are close to concluding their work. So, can I ask the Prime Minister to ensure that the coast-to-coast does indeed become Britain's greatest national trail, and in preparation for my return to the backbenches, would he meet with me to discuss it?
Mr. Speaker, I thought he was about to ask me to join him on the walk. But certainly, I will meet him, and it is an important point.
Mr. Speaker, that is very kind of the Prime Minister. I know he's, I know he's partial to the Lake District, but perhaps we can tempt him over to our end as well. Now, Yorkshire is not just famous for its walks, but also for being home to some of England's greatest cricketers. Now, sadly, no one's going to put me on that list, Mr. Speaker, but who knows? I've got a lot more time to practice now. So, but cricket does have the power to bring people together from all communities and give them fantastic opportunities, as shown so powerfully by Andrew Flintoff's recent documentary. Yeah. Now, we also lead the world in female participation, and that will stand us in good stead when we host the Women's World Cup in 2026 and when cricket becomes an Olympic sport in 2028. So could I therefore ask the Prime Minister to continue government support for the England and Wales Cricket Board's new initiative to get cricket into vastly more state schools, fostering a whole new generation of cricketers for us all to cheer on at every level?
Yes, is the answer to that question. And the point is a really important one. We celebrate cricket, it does bring communities together, but it's also really important for children and young people to enjoy sport, lots of different sports, because it gives them a confidence that they might not otherwise have. It gives them the ability to work in a team and teaches them about skills like leadership. So I'm fully supportive.
Now, our two predecessors, Sir Tony Blair and Lord Hague, have repeatedly come together and powerfully argued in their joint reports that it is vital for the future prosperity of Britain's economy, society and public services for us to be a world leader in technology and innovation. Now, the Prime Minister and I may not yet be at our joint report writing stage yet, but in a similar spirit of cross-party agreement, could I ask him to find his inner tech bro and continue to support emerging British tech businesses and establish our country as the home of AI growth and innovation?
Prime Minister.
Yes, and this is a really important point. The Leader of the Opposition held a summit last year on AI, which was very important. We have been bringing together the leaders in AI. We have a huge advantage in this country, being ranked in the top 3 in the world. AI is going to have huge potential for our growth, for our public services, and I think the whole House should be fully supportive of this.
Prime Minister.
The Prime Minister has the immense privilege The Prime Minister has the immense privilege of being the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. Now, Northern Ireland is a special part of our union, but one that needs particular care, attention and respect. Having a strong functioning assembly at Stormont is good for the people of Northern Ireland and good for our union. And that's why I was so pleased to see government restored there earlier this year, and I'm grateful to him for his support with that. So can he assure the House that he will continue to work to keep Stormont open, delivering for the Northern Irish people and strengthening Northern Ireland's place in our union?
Prime Minister.
Yes, and again, this is a really important point and one that matters to me personally. I worked for 5 years in Northern Ireland on some of the proposals under the Good Friday Agreement, in particular the transformation of the RUC into the police service of Northern Ireland. I worked with both communities there. It was for 5 years. It was very important to me, had a huge impact on me, and so I care deeply about Northern Ireland, and I absolutely agree that the institutions government needs to be up and running and want to give all support I can to the further development in Northern Ireland.
Now, as Prime Minister, he will be acutely aware of the threats that our United Kingdom faces from an axis of authoritarian states, Iran, North Korea, Russia and China. And in particular, I'm proud of the way that this House has united in standing up to Russian aggression in Ukraine. And I know that we will never waver in our commitment to the Ukrainian cause. Now, I will always be grateful for the support that he gave me when we were the first country to send Ukraine Western battle tanks, long-range missiles, and the first to offer security assurances to Kyiv. So in light of the threats that we face, can I urge him to always maintain the strength of the transatlantic alliance and ensure that NATO remains the bedrock of Western security, with the United Kingdom playing a leading role?
Yes, and NATO is, in my view, as important today as the day in which it was created in light of the challenges that we face. And it was a Labour government that was the proud co-founder of NATO, and we've repeatedly said we support NATO to the hilt.
Rishi Sunak.
Well, finally, Mr. Speaker, tomorrow is Diwali. And I became leader of my party during Diwali, and I now stand down during that same festival. So I'm proud to have been the first British Asian Prime Minister, but I was even prouder that it was not that big a deal. And that speaks volumes about the values of the British people, of our country, and of this Parliament. So will the Prime Minister join me in applauding the kindness, decency and tolerance that has always been the British way?
Prime Minister.
Yes, and I meant what I said when I said that we were all proud to see him standing there as Prime Minister, representing our diverse country. We were all proud. I think everybody in this House was. So I thank him for that. And his last question, final question as leader of the opposition, although judging by the speed with which his party goes through leaders, he may be back here before too long. But in the meantime, I'm sure he'll be a great champion for the people of Richmond. But, Mr. Speaker, finally, I'm sure he won't mind me disclosing to the House the contents of a letter that he wrote to me this week. My answer to it is clear. Yes, I will arrange for him to meet the relevant minister about the A66 that runs through his constituency.
Dave Begg-Hillier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in Hackney, nearly 4,000 children who could fill 8 primary schools are in temporary accommodation, many outside London. This is bad for their future opportunities. It's ripping apart our communities. I welcome the government's pledge to build new homes, but will he ensure that those who cannot have a roof over their head are a top priority in that long queue for new housing?
Prime Minister.
I thank you for raising this issue. It is a source of national shame that there are just under 1.3 million households on a social housing waiting list, including, I think, 8,000 of them in Hackney. The best way to tackle overcrowding and meet housing need is to build the homes this country needs, and that's why we will deliver the 1.5 million homes over this Parliament, and the Chancellor will set out further details in just a moment.
Leader of the Liberal Democrats, Sir Ed Dick.
Are we on? Hey, okay. Rishi Sunak testimonial there, Ava Santina.
This is final PMQs, isn't
Oh, are you proud? Have
I-
you been proud of? That's what Starmer said. We are all proud of you and your time as Prime Minister.
Well, do you know why, actually? This probably relates to something that Rachel Reeves said on yesterday to Jeremy Hunt across the dispatch box, where she actually thanked him for steering the UK out of the disastrous mini-budget imposed on us by Liz Truss. She actually thanked him for the 2% inflation that we're all currently enjoying. So, I mean, it's classy, isn't it? It's expected. Dennis Skinner would never have done it.
Do you think politics should be based on consensus or adversarialism? Do you think someone, in theory, whose politics should be oppositional, if not conflicting, like the leader of the Labour Party with the leader of the Tory Party, do you think they should be thanking each other and talking about each other in as glowing terms as they were just then, and kind of having a bit of a laugh? Like, I understand, there's a symbolism, there's a significance to it being Sunak's last ever Prime Minister's questions, and it's funny the backbench stuff. All right, whatever. But during the general election campaign, it's you've wrecked the country. If you genuinely think he's wrecked the country, are you proud of his time as Prime Minister?
There are probably a few things that Labour worked cross-party on that they wouldn't want to be too downbeat on. For example, throughout the pandemic and the furlough scheme, I think that's something that Rishi Sunak should actually wear as a badge of honour. And Labour, they passed the emergency legislation at the time. So if they were to be adversarial now, actually, it would make them look sort of a bit rotten. But then on the other side,
Don't forget the TUC as well in the furlough.
The TUC and the furlough. What
Yeah.
am I remembering about them?
Well, just the role that the unions, and particularly the TUC played in lobbying Downing Street at the time for implementing a furlough scheme.
Okay, sorry, I forgot what podcast I was on for a minute. Sorry. I forgot we care about the workers on here. Sorry, I thought it was another network.
And the other thing would be, security, right? Which actually Sunak asked him about. There, he talks about NATO, talks about commitment to NATO. I tell you what, I've been reading a book this week, Annie Jacobson, Nuclear War: A Scenario, and it is terrifying. The prospect of what happens if someone launches a nuclear weapon at the United States.
Yeah, but this is how they get you. This is what they did during Vietnam.
What? They scare you?
Frightened you into consenting to more war.
Well, I think the rationale of the book and the logic of the book is actually that it's kind of insane, the provision of nuclear weaponry, and that the main thing that stood out, I haven't finished it yet. The main thing that stood out to me whilst I've been reading it, it was actually recommended to me by someone in the YouTube comments, is that the US president essentially has 6 minutes to decide whether or not he wants to destroy the planet.
Yes, which is why a lot of Trump's counsel during his time as president used to sleep in sportswear rather than pajamas because they would panic. They were panicked
they'd have to
that he'd
run.
launch it during the middle of the night.
Yeah.
Oh, by the way, just before we keep going, I do think that we should say we are going to cut in and out of PMQs if we think it's important.
Yeah, absolutely. Laura and Sean listening attentively to the chamber right now. If there's a decent question, we will throw back.
We will let you know. Rachel Maskell's just been stood up there, actually. She was the only Labour MP, I believe, to go on record to oppose Labour's VAT plan for private schools. She's not happy about it at all.
What a woman.
The Telegraph really celebrated her. But what made me laugh about that was the Telegraph was so happy about it, and I saw a few of their journalists commending her for it. And if you go onto Rachel Maskell's page, she's like a real pro-Palestinian advocate. Oh, how's this going to tally with the editorial?
Yeah, well, indeed. They find common cause when it comes to the private schools. Carla Denyer there as well. But look, yeah, once it gets interesting, we'll throw to it. I've got to be honest, you expect there to be like a joke or two, final session from Sunak. Relatively softball, NATO question about cricket participation, which is obviously something he cares about particularly.
Coast-to-coast route in his constituency.
Wonderful stuff.
Asked him to meet him on that.
Yeah. How much turnover do you expect to see on the Tory party front bench?
Well, I think it really depends, doesn't it? Depends who's going to be to be the leader. You see, with someone like Robert Jenrick, you think about, he sort of flip-flops through ministerial positions, so perhaps he doesn't take the sort of longevity in office as seriously as perhaps old Tory grandees might have done. Like someone like Michael Gove, he's, died by the sword. Robert Jenrick perhaps not so. Do you remember he wasn't particularly happy with the Rwanda plan? It wasn't harsh enough, so he just went, see you later.
Ciao.
Leaving the front bench.
Yeah. I see it. There's a world in which I see Cleverly. I think Cleverly's still part of their shadow cabinet. You'd think Jeremy Hunt, in some capacity. You'd think...
Oh, you meant who's still going to be there? I thought you meant how often they're going to shuffle the cabinet. That's why I was like, it's a rogue question, but I'll go with it.
No, I mean, as in the current shadow cabinet. Sunak will no longer be Prime Minister. There'll be a new leader of the opposition. They'll appoint their own appointments. How many new faces do you think we're going to see turn up in those appointments? How many?
Well, I wonder if it's Kemi Badenoch, if she'll appoint Danny Kruger to the front bench. Because he's got that sort of he's almost evangelical. He's quite American in his beliefs about the family. And Kemi Badenoch is to an extent as well. Oh, we'll go back to Tice.
Richard Tice on his feet. Let's hear what he has to say.
In order to prevent an information gap. Does the Prime Minister agree?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, obviously I'll tread carefully in answering this question for the very reasons that you yourself set out at the beginning of this session. I think it's very important, first and foremost, that in all cases, including the particularly difficult case that the Speaker mentioned earlier, that the police and prosecutors are able to do their difficult job. And all of us in this House have a choice to make, including both candidates candidates to be the next Tory leader. They can either support the police in their difficult task, or they can undermine the police in their difficult task. And I know which side I'm on.
Rachel Blake.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Minutes from here in the communities of Victoria...
Badenoch there, smiling away at that question, that issue raised by Tice. I mean, it was inevitable, really, haven't they? They've been banging the drum about this, and we will just say as well, we have to be careful about this, right? There are live legal proceedings around that case. So there's a reason why people aren't necessarily speaking about it in the way that people might expect them to. Obviously, contributions in the Chamber are protected by parliamentary privilege. So,
well, the Speaker, Lindsay Hall, did open today's Prime Minister's questions by saying that we aren't going to be talking about Southport. So
Tice is like, I do what I want. Yeah, look.
But I think that's what's sort of quite frightening about the reporting restrictions, because I'm not suggesting that in all cases, every single time there's a news story, that certain information is not withheld when it shouldn't have been withheld. But the frightening thing about the way that our reporting restrictions work in this country is that it really does aid and abet the far right, because when information is contained, there's this really great case that can be whipped up by the likes of that person who's now in prison, Stephen Yaxley Lennon, and say things like, they're with the establishment, they're not telling you these things, they're withholding the information. Doesn't really necessarily apply to this case, but
look, I wouldn't necessarily put that political inflection on it. I think the substance of your point is right. You know, nature abhors a vacuum. If you don't talk about what's happening, anyone of any political persuasion can project onto it. I think Chris Cabber actually is a pretty good example of this relatively recently. In the UK, we have very restrictive laws around media reporting of criminal trials. And I think you can look across the Atlantic to the United States to see a pretty clear example of what happens if you don't have those laws in place, if you enshrine freedom of speech in your constitution, and people are essentially able to say whatever they want about live criminal proceedings. And as a result, quite often what happens, whether it's in relation to David Lammy waving in the chamber there, not really sure who he's waving to, the
he's meant to be on the front bench. That's probably why he's waving it. He's probably like, I'm on my way.
And you end up with trial by media, right? You end up with a day's worth of court proceedings being broadcast on cable news, legal experts being brought in to commentate on it, and it's where O.J. Simpson is a pretty classic example of this. I don't know if you've watched, was it Monster, that Netflix show about the Menendez brothers recently?
I did start watching it. Yeah.
Like, that is what happens if you don't have these laws in place, because essentially, and judges say this to jurors during a trial, they say, do not watch or consume the media. The only thing that should inform the decision that you come to at the end of this trial is what you hear inside the courtroom. You don't want to. The reason we don't talk about things like that during a live trial is because it's contempt of court. There's a risk that information that the judge has ruled isn't relevant to a case influences the people who are deciding on the case, right? So an example might be Chris Cabber's criminal history, right? The judge in that instance decided that wasn't relevant to the case because the police officer, Martin Blake, didn't know who was in the car at the time of the shooting. So he ruled it can't be used in court. And equally, there were media reporting restrictions. So every media institution in the UK could not report on Cabber's criminal history in case one of the members of the jury saw it, read it during the trial. I am okay, and it's sort of like to reporter's frustration, to be honest with you, with a lot of this information not coming to light until a trial has concluded. Because I actually think, particularly as journalists, we're so focused, and the entire trade is based around finding out information that no one else knows and reporting on it first. And there's obviously value to that. But the kind of culture that inculcates means we're not very reflective. We're not very retrospective in the way that we don't wait, for example, for a 2-year-long criminal trial process to conclude, to then go, right, well, let's actually engage with the substance of what happened now. We know what happened. It's been established in court. Let's talk about it because, and in a way, this is where audiences come into it, because people lose interest, right? Like 2 years down the line, you're like, well, I cared about this when it happened. I don't care about it anymore. So it's tricky, but I kind of find myself broadly in support of reporting restrictions of the type we've just been talking about, because as have you just seen that there are plenty of people, it doesn't matter their political persuasion, there are plenty of people in politics who are prepared to weaponise and capitalise on these things. And if we just waited like a little bit longer, if we wait till this trial concludes, we'll know the substance of what happened. I feel like I spoke a lot there.
Well, I mean, I was listening. I actually forgot we were recording something. I was just listening.
Entrancing.
Yeah, it was. It really was. Should we talk a little bit about the budget, what we can expect?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, great. Well, it's very exciting, isn't it?
It is. It's imminent, right?
It is imminent.
PMQs will be concluding soon, and then we'll be throwing to Rachel Reeves. So, yeah. Shoot, what can we expect, Ava?
We know quite a lot about it already. So this is Labour's budget for investment. There's going to be new taxes, new borrowing, and new fiscal rules. And the fiscal rules are very exciting because it provides more spending power.
Fiscal rules are very exciting.
They are exciting. To dumb down what we're expecting from, what actually has been announced now by Darren Jones, the Chief Secretary to the Treasury, on the fiscal rules, we're going to see... Ooh.
What?
Are you meant to be screaming at me in my earpiece?
Me?
No. Let me turn it off. Just screaming at me.
What, someone's screaming in your ear?
Yeah, anyway, I've turned it off now. Okay, so Laura, if you could please just wait a minute. Yeah. So Chancellor Rachel Reeves, she is going to reclassify some government debt as assets. The government would then be able to borrow against things like student loans, schools or infrastructure projects, freeing up around £50 billion in spending power. And that means they'll be able to do things like nationalise the rails or create GB Energy, which, by the way, had its third reading yesterday. So that means it's going to the Lords. So that means Ed Miliband's project to make us the hub of green energy will be realised possibly within the next decade.
Ed, I feel like...
It's getting its flowers.
Yes, a hardcore socialist like Miliband. I feel like we should project a Latin American flavour to him. I think at the very least it's Eduardo.
Yeah.
And then I'm not sure if we take Miliband to a sort of Latin American surname, but at the very least I think Eduardo Miliband. Eduardo Mile.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
How did I not get there? It's very
Bando
close.
de Mile?
Nice.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Good accent. You would expect it, though. Yeah. Big news. The problem with all of this investment stuff, right? I can't remember which of the big four it was. I want to say KPMG. Might have been Deloitte. Someone did how much money does the UK actually need to be spent? And it's essentially the size of the entire UK economy when they looked at the shortfall in investment spending in the UK. It was like £2 trillion that they basically concluded needed to be spent. And so whilst you're, welcoming, for example, the 63, I think it was about there, mid-60s, let's call it, £1 billion from the investment summit that they held recently, when you're talking about 50 billion as a result of redefining the fiscal rules. These are all significant sums of money, don't get me wrong. I'd love to have 50 billion quid. But I'm not sure it matches the scale. These firms like KPMG, they're not sort of like paragons of socialism, right? This frank analysis of kind of the infrastructure deficiencies in the country and the inward investment that's required. And if they're saying it's going to take that much cash, or certainly that's what we've missed in comparison to our European neighbours, you're sort of going, well...
But not all of that is meant to be public money.
No.
Some of that is meant to be private investment, right? You're meant to put £1 in of public money and you get £3 back of private investment.
They would like that, yeah.
Yes, and so when you look at things like Tata Steel, for example, where we just the Tories promised them £500 million to build an electric furnace and also sack nearly 3,000 people. That will be an example of how not to do investment.
Yeah.
The investment that we're looking for now is more jobs and things that we can use.
I saw I've forgotten the name of the account, so I can't give it full credit. Look who's
Eduardo.
decided to come in.
It's perfect timing. They're just switching over for the budget.
Ed Campbell's
Eduardo.
here. Yeah, good, mate. How are you?
He's been with his friends, haven't you?
Say again, sorry, mate.
Well, yeah.
PMQs is over. The budget is imminent. Okay, so as I said earlier on in the record... we'll be cutting backwards and forwards between PMQs and the budget. When Rachel Reeves gets on her feet, we will throw over.
You look nice today.
Thank you. To there, we're watching along, we'll be reacting, we'll be telling you what's happening. Do stay with us. I think we might as well utilise the opportunity that we're about to get to actually sort of like mic you up. That in-ear piece sounds horrible.
Does it hit? We had the one in...
Oh no, that sucks. There's no even point in putting it in.
The principle is clearly and unambiguously set out in the paragraph 9.1 of the Ministerial Code. The premature disclosure of the contents of this House, contents of the budget, have always been regarded as a supreme discourtesy to this House and all of its democratically elected MPs, not to mention to Mr. Speaker and the Chairman of Ways and Means. I really don't need any help. Let me remind the Treasury front bench. The budget statement and ensuing resolutions are the most important Ways and Means business of the House, Erskine May 36-33. I am disappointed by comments made by government spokespeople believing they can use precedent as an excuse. I am telling them today that they are entirely wrong. Mr. Speaker has always defended the undoubted right of this House, including opposition parties and backbenchers on all sides of this House, to be the first to hear major government policy announcements on behalf of their constituents. As Chairman of Ways and Means, I have responsibility to oversee the House's consideration of the budget fairly and impartially, and to ensure that honourable members on all sides of this House have adequate opportunity to hold the Chancellor to account. Finally, we collectively, we should all remember to respect the Chair, respect our colleagues, and to respect this House. Now, before I call the Chancellor of the Exchequer, I am remind honourable members that copies of the budget resolutions will be available to them from the Vote Office in Members' Lobby at the end of the Chancellor's statement and, of course, online. I also remind honourable members that interventions are not taken during the Chancellor's statement, nor during the replies of the Leader of the Opposition or of the Leader of the Liberal Democrats. I call the Chancellor of the Exchequer.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. On July the 4th, the country voted for change. This government was given a mandate to restore stability to our economy and to begin a decade of national renewal, to fix the foundations and deliver change through responsible leadership in the national interest. That is our task, and I know that we can achieve it. My belief in Britain burns brighter than ever, and the prize on offer is immense. As my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, said on Monday, change must be felt. More pounds in people's pockets, an NHS that is there when you need it, an economy that is growing, creating wealth and opportunity for all, because that is the only way to improve living standards. And the only way to drive economic growth is to invest, invest, invest. There are no shortcuts. And to deliver that investment, we must restore economic stability and turn the page on the last 14 years. This is not the first time that it has fallen to the Labour Party to rebuild Britain. In 1945, it was the Labour Party that rebuilt our country from the rubble of the Second World War. In 1964, it was the Labour Party that rebuilt Britain with the white heat of technology. And in 1997, it was the Labour Party that rebuilt our schools and hospitals. Today, it falls to this Labour Party, to this Labour government, to rebuild Britain once again. And while this is the first budget in more than 14 years to be delivered by a Labour Chancellor, it is the first budget in our country's history to be delivered by a woman. I am deeply proud to be Britain's first ever female Chancellor of the Exchequer. To girls and young women everywhere, I say, let there be no ceiling on your ambition, your hopes and your dreams. And along with the pride that I feel standing here today, there is also a responsibility to pass on a fairer society and a stronger generation to the next generation of women. Madam Deputy Speaker, the party opposite failed our country. Their austerity broke our National Health Service. Their Brexit deal harmed British businesses. And their mini-budget left families paying the price with higher mortgages. The British people have inherited their failure. A black hole in the public finances. Public services on their knees. A decade of low growth and the worst Parliament on record for living standards. Let me begin with the public finances. In July, I exposed a £22 billion black hole at the heart of the previous government's plans. A series of promises that they made but had no money to deliver. Covered up from the British people, covered up from this House.
Rachel Reeves delivering the budget. I'm joined by Eva Santina. The cuck chair is filled.
Number one cuck.
Top cuck Ed Top Campbell. Cuck. Back in business, baby.
It's like being the top boy in a firm.
This is like the Rizzler and the Costco guys appearing on that chat show.
Who's the Rizzler? Who's AJ?
She's just
who's
going
Big
through the
Justice?
black hole at the moment, the £22 billion black hole. And she commissioned that report with the OBR that's going to be published in about 20 minutes.
Oofed.
That should confirm it.
Exciting stuff.
I don't really think she needed to lay all of this out. Everyone knew. The £22 billion has probably had the most cut through since the election.
So much of what's happening now, Eva Santina, we've heard already.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like, whether it's the policies that are about to be announced, whether it's the political sort of groundwork happening before, you know, Tories wreck the economy, yada, yada, yada. Oh, you missed. You would have hated it.
Oh.
Keir Starmer told Rishi Sunak at the end of his final PMQs how proud he was of him.
Of Rishi Sunak?
Yeah.
Why? What's he done?
Well, I think it was kind of in a, you know, first person of South Asian heritage to be Prime Minister type way.
Okay.
But it was all very friendly.
Sounded quite patronising.
Well done.
Yeah.
Well done.
If that's the only thing that can be... Oh, hello.
Love
Hello.
it. That we're familiar with the Parliament TV player.
My favourite website.
Ed, what are you excited about in the budget? What are you looking forward
In the budget?
to? And sorry, by the way,
Capital Flight.
The reason Ed wasn't here is because he's been actually at the coalface of the economy.
Absolutely.
The wealth creators.
The
strivers.
The investors.
Yeah.
The scrimpers and savers.
People
with
sales?
Yes. The people, the hardest workers in the room. The people who have a property portfolio of 10.
Some HMO boys.
One man told me that being a landlord is harder than being Prime Minister.
Gosh, look at that. So the OBR she is now quoting from the OBR. Previous government did not provide all the information, this is direct from the report. Had they known about the undisclosed pressures, then their spring budget forecast would have been materially different.
Oh, wow.
So this black hole that they're talking about expenditure that wasn't accounted for. So what Labour alleged and the OBR has now backed up is that they did not pass on, the Treasury did not pass on correct figures. And that was felt most evidently in the Home Office when Labour first took office. The projection of spending for the Rwanda plan that was not actually properly released to the OBR. It was in the billions when it was projected to be 100 million. And then there were transport as well, this £2 bus fare cap that they've had to drop now going up to £3 because that was unaccounted for. All these sorts of little different bits of expenditures. But yeah, I mean, that could have been... should we go back in?
Yeah, we can do. I'd invite comment from the two of you before we do. Is this Mother? What's happening here?
Mother.
Yeah. That's quite Mother. That side angle.
She looks commanding.
Yeah, it's
she does
quite
look
powerful,
good.
isn't it?
It is a powerful image. Do you think?
Would we call that a power bob?
Yeah, it's a sharp haircut. Do you think people will be putting the future Chancellor will have her picture in her frame?
I tell you what, I actually do think I should tell you both of this before we go back. New Labour MP John Pearce was in the hospital this morning welcoming his newborn into the world, but he's back for the budget and PMQs.
Take a day off.
Not sure he's going to be married for much longer.
No, you can take it. Ollie, you're a father. Yeah. How would your wife have taken that?
I'm telling you, Girl Boss might be delivering the budget,
Yeah.
but the real
father.
Girl Boss is but the real Girl Boss is the one who's given birth this morning.
Absolutely.
And now has
She's given birth to a whole new
to do
economy.
it alone.
So I think that is harder.
God, we are so 1960. Should we?
Being Chancellor's harder.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, darling. We've got to go back to listen to the budget.
Yeah,
Put it on the TV.
That is pretty tough.
Oh.
Right, let's go back in. Intervention.
I just mentioned respecting colleagues. The public are watching. They want to hear what the Chancellor has to say. Simmer down.
I would politely suggest that honourable members listen to this, because it includes funding for vital compensation schemes for victims of two terrible injustices: the infected blood scandal and the Post Office Horizon scandal. The Leader of the Opposition rightly made an unequivocal apology for the injustice of the infected blood scandal on behalf of the British state. But he did not budget for the costs of compensation. Today, for the very first time, we will provide specific funding to compensate those infected and those affected in full. Yeah. With £11.8 billion in this budget. And I am also today setting aside £1.8 billion to compensate victims of the Post Office Horizon scandal. Yeah. Redress that is long overdue for the pain and injustice that they have suffered. Yeah. Madam Deputy Speaker, the leadership campaign for the party opposite has now been going on for over 3 months. But in all that time, not one single apology for what they did to our country. Because the Conservative Party has not changed. But this is a changed Labour Party, and we will restore stability to our country once again. The scale and seriousness of the situation that we have inherited cannot be underestimated. Together, the hole in our public finances this year, which recurs every year, the compensation schemes that they did not fund, and their failure to assess the scale of the challenges facing our public services means that this budget raises taxes by £40 billion. Any Chancellor standing here today would have to face this reality. And any responsible Chancellor would take action. That is why today I am restoring stability to our public finances and rebuilding our public services. As a former economist at the Bank of England, I know what it means to respect our economic institutions. I want to put on record my thanks to the Governor of the Bank, Andrew Bailey, and to the Independent Monetary Policy Committee. Today, I can confirm that we will maintain the MPC's target of 2% inflation, as measured by the 12-month increase in the Consumer Prices Index. I want to thank James Bowler, the Permanent Secretary to the Treasury, and my team of officials. Madam Deputy Speaker, I would also like to thank my predecessors as Chancellor of the Exchequer for their wise counsel as I have prepared for this budget. In particular, I would like to thank the former Right Honourable Member for Spelthorne for his invaluable advice in this weekend's papers, where he concluded that his mini-budget, and I quote, wasn't perfect. Well, for once, Madam Deputy Speaker, I think him and I are in absolute agreement. Finally, I want to thank Richard Hughes and his team at the Office for Budget Responsibility for their work in preparing today's economic and fiscal outlook. Let me now take the House through that forecast. The cost of living crisis under the last government stretched household finances to their limit, with inflation hitting a peak of above 11%. Today, the OBR say that CPI inflation will average 2.5% this year, 2.6% in 2025, then 2.3% in 2026, 2.1% in 2027, 2.1% in 2028, and 2.0% in 2029. Next, I move on to economic growth. Today's budget marks an end to short-termism. So I am pleased that for the first time, the OBR have published not only 5-year growth forecasts, but a detailed assessment of the growth impacts of our policies over the next decade too. And the new Charter for Budget Responsibility, which I am publishing today, confirms that this will become a permanent feature of our framework. The OBR forecast that real GDP growth will be 1.1% in 2024, 2.0% in 2025, 1.8% in 2026, 1.5% in 2027, 1.5% in 2028, and 1.6% in 2029. And the OBR are clear. This budget will permanently increase the supply capacity of the economy, boosting long-term growth. Every budget, it might sound shocking to them, but this government is boosting long-term economic growth. Every budget that I deliver will be focused on our mission to grow the economy. And underpinning that mission are the 7 key pillars of our growth strategy, developed and delivered alongside business, all driven forward by our excellent Financial Secretary to the Treasury. First, and most important, is to restore economic stability. That is my focus today. Second, increasing investment and building new infrastructure is vital for productivity. So we are catalysing £70 billion of investment through our National Wealth Fund. And we are transforming our planning rules to get Britain building again. Third, to ensure that all parts of the UK can realise their potential, we are working with the devolved governments and partnering with our mayors to develop local growth plans. Fourth, to improve employment prospects and skills, we are creating Skills England, delivering our plans to make work pay and tackling economic inactivity. Fifth, we are launching our long-term modern industrial strategy and expanding opportunities for our small and medium-sized businesses to grow. Sixth, to drive innovation, we are protecting record funding for research and development to harness the full potential of the UK's science base. And finally, to maximise the growth benefits of our clean energy mission, we have confirmed key investments such as carbon capture and storage to create jobs in our industrial heartlands. Our approach is already having an impact. Just 2 weeks ago, we delivered an international investment summit which saw businesses commit £63.5 billion of investment into our country, creating nearly 40,000 jobs across the United Kingdom. But we cannot undo 14 years of damage in one go. Economic growth will be our mission for the duration of this Parliament.
Does it look to you like Darren Jones and Keir Starmer both have those sort of disguised glasses and nose attachments on?
Like a Groucho Marx
just confirm the fiscal rules if we want to go back in.
The stability rule means that we will bring the current budget into balance so that we do not borrow to fund day-to-day spending. We will meet this rule in 2029-30 until that becomes the 3rd year of the forecast. From then on, we will balance the current budget in the 3rd year of every budget held annually each autumn. That will provide a tougher constraint on day-to-day spending so that difficult decisions cannot be constantly delayed or deferred. The OBR say that the current budget will be in deficit by £26.2 billion in 2025-26 and £5.2 billion in 2026.
Ava, Rachel Reeves there on the fiscal rules. Can you just explain to people the significance of what she's just said?
Yes, so she's reclassified some government debt as assets, which means that the government will now be able to.
No, we're doing this seriously, all right?
It's government
we're doing it seriously. My Why?
The government will be able to borrow against those assets. So things like the student loans, which are about 1.7, well, they were £1.7 billion when they were first sold. They're a bit more than that now. They'll be able to borrow against those because students are paying them back over their lifetime.
And that's significant because it gives her
headroom,
quite a significant amount of fiscal headroom to now spend.
50 billion?
And still, about 50 billion quid, and still adhere to the fiscal rule of having debt falling as a proportion of GDP by the end of the Parliament, because she's changing the definition of debt. Very important point I would like to pick up there, Ava. You said borrowing against asses, I think, just then. And have you seen, there was an Italian-backed TikTok the other day where he did like when you're trying to give serious news but you mispronounce, and it was like he started talking to his girlfriend and she's like, my nan's just dud. And he goes, well, she's dead, is she?
Yep.
Is she going to rest in puss?
Yep.
Anyway,
that's good stuff.
It was good stuff.
It's a shame that I couldn't have let that go, or neither you nor I could let, if I'm mispronouncing assets, go there.
Anyway, on the back of those very anemic growth projections. But however, the OBR have really done her a solid there.
She was saying like 2%, didn't she?
No, but it's decreasing.
Yeah.
Like by 2029, she was saying like 1.7% growth.
Tasty.
Back in?
Yeah, back in, yeah. Yeah, back in.
I made £5.5 billion of savings this year. Today we are setting a 2% productivity, efficiency and savings target for all departments to meet next year by using technology more effectively and joining up services across government. As set out in our manifesto, I will shortly be appointing our COVID Corruption Commissioner. They will lead our work to uncover those companies that used a national emergency to line their own pockets. Because that money belongs in our public services and taxpayers want that money back. And I can confirm today that David Goldstone has been appointed as the chair of the new Office for Value for Money to help us realise the benefits from every pound of public spending. Today, I am also taking 3 steps to ensure that welfare spending is more sustainable. First, we inherited the last government's plans to reform the work capability assessment. We will deliver those savings as part of our fundamental reforms to the health and disabilities benefits system that my right honourable friend, the Work and Pensions Secretary, will bring forward. Second, I can today announce a crackdown on fraud in our welfare system, often the work of criminal gangs. We will expand DWP's counter-fraud teams, using innovative new methods to prevent illegal activity and provide new legal powers to crack down on fraudsters, including direct access to bank accounts to recover debt. This package saves £4.3 billion a year by the end of the forecast. Third, the government will shortly be publishing the Get Britain Working white paper, tackling the root causes of inactivity with an integrated approach across health, education and welfare. And we will provide £240 million for 16 trailblazer projects targeted at those who are economically inactive and most at risk of being out of education, employment or training, to get people into work and to reduce the benefits bill. Before a government could consider any change to a tax rate or threshold, it must ensure that people pay what they already owe. So we will invest to modernise HMRC systems using the very best technology and recruit additional HMRC compliance and debt staff. We will clamp down on those umbrella companies who exploit workers, increase the interest rate on unpaid tax debt to ensure that people pay on time, and go after the promoters of tax avoidance schemes. These measures to reduce the tax gap raise £6.5 billion by the end of the forecast. And I want to thank the Exchequer Secretary for his outstanding work on this agenda. Madam Deputy Speaker, I know that for working people up and down our country, family finances are stretched and paychecks don't go as far as they once did. So today I am taking steps to support people with the cost of living. It was the Labour government that introduced the national minimum wage in 1999. It had a transformative impact on the lives of working people. As promised in our manifesto, we asked the Low Pay Commission to take account of the cost of living for the first time. I can confirm that we will accept the Low Pay Commission recommendation to increase the national living wage by 6.7% to £12.21 an hour, worth up to £1,400 a year for a full-time worker. And for the first time, we will move towards a single adult rate phased in over time by initially increasing the national minimum wage for 18 to 20-year-olds by 16.3% as recommended by the Low Pay Commission, taking it to £10 an hour. A Labour policy to protect working people being delivered by a Labour government once again. Second, I have heard representations from colleagues across this House about the carers allowance and the impact of the current policy on carers looking to increase the hours that they work, including from the Honourable Members for Shipley, the Honourable Member for Scarborough and Whitby, and the Right Honourable Member for Kingston and Surbiton too. Carers allowance currently provides up to £81.90 per week to help those with additional caring responsibilities. Today I can confirm that we are increasing the weekly earnings limit to the equivalent of 16 hours at the national living wage per week, the largest increase in carers allowance since it was introduced in 1976. This means that a carer can now earn over £10,000 a year while receiving carers allowance, allowing them to increase their hours where they want to and keep more of their money. I am also concerned about the cliff edge in the current system and the issue of overpayments. My right honourable friend, the work...
Who should they appoint as the COVID corruption inquirer?
Batman?
Michelle Mone?
That'd be quite on brand for COVID contracting.
The landlord of Rachel Reeves' pub. Minimum wage stuff's big.
Actually, someone who is good at getting PPE.
Yeah.
Someone who owns a PPE factory.
40. She said 40 billion.
Tax rises. In cash terms, that's the biggest budget tax rising ever. Because before she was saying it was going to be 35 billion in tax rises and 5 billion in spending cuts. If it's 40 billion in tax rises, that's bigger than Brown in 97.
Mm-hmm. For the sake of 1.6% growth.
Big.
It's trying to get people to buy in to this.
Are you sold, brother?
Well, the landlords aren't sold, believe it or not. They're not convinced that the Labour government are on their side, and I think that's probably fair. But what I thought was interesting was there's no culture of being like people in business should value the country that they live in. They should contribute to. They get to use our infrastructure. They just get to profit off of it. They don't have to make sure the infrastructure works. I wonder if there needs to be a whole way of how we talk about business, like because other countries are much more attractive to do business in because they don't have any workers' rights and you don't have to pay any tax. So we can't just bend over to compete with these countries. There needs to be like an honour thing for it.
Should we go back?
In our manifesto, we promised to transfer the Investment Reserve Fund in the Mine Workers Pension Scheme to members. And I have listened closely to my honourable friends for Easington, Doncaster Central, Blaenau Gwent and Ayr, Carrick and Cumnock on this issue. Today, we are keeping our promise so that working people who powered our country receive the fair pension that they are owed. Our manifesto committed to the triple lock, meaning spending on the state pension is forecast to rise by over £31 billion by 2029-30, to ensure that our pensioners are protected in their retirement. This commitment means that while working age benefits will be uprated in line with CPI at 1.7%, the basic and new state pension will be uprated by 4.1% in 2025-26. This means that over 12 million pensioners will gain up to £470 next year, up to £275 more than if uprated by inflation. The pension credit standard minimum guarantee will also rise by 4.1%, from around £11,400 per year to around £11,850 a year for a single pensioner. While I have sought to protect working people with measures to reduce the cost of living, I've had to take some very difficult decisions on tax. I want to set out my approach to fuel duty. Baked into the numbers that I inherited from the previous government is an assumption that fuel duty will rise by RPI next year and that the temporary 5p cut will be reversed. To retain the 5p cut and to freeze fuel duty again would cost over £3 billion next year. At a time when the fiscal position is so difficult, I have to be frank with the House that this is a substantial commitment to make. I have concluded that in these difficult circumstances, while the cost of living remains high, and with a backdrop of global uncertainty, increasing fuel duty next year would be the wrong choice for working people. It would mean fuel duty rising by 7p.
Fuck Rachel Reeves. That is a joke.
That is a joke.
That is a joke. Like, we've spoken about it before. Freezing fuel duty whilst the cost of public transport spirals almost exponentially is a joke. It is the only... Driving a car is the only thing in this country that essentially the government subsidises. And not only that, your lungs are subsidising it, right? It is fucking terrible for air quality. The idea that the government shouldn't try and tax that, or at least raise taxes on it, is fucking mental. Mental.
Well, I wonder how much it's cost. We can work that out in the next interim. £2 to £3 on the bus fare cap. How much would it have cost for them to keep it at £2 versus the fuel duty freeze?
I'm deeply unimpressed.
Very unimpressed?
Yeah,
You?
Deeply unimpressed.
I don't think you can tell.
Deeply unimpressed.
What would you like to have seen?
Increase it.
Increase it?
Jack it up, brother.
Jack it up.
Significant increase in fuel duty, and I would almost also be in favour of her being like, I'm increasing fuel duty to divert the money to public transport for climate and environmental reasons, for the fact that, for whatever reason, governments in this country have kowtowed to motorists for decades. And it's a joke. It's a joke.
Not increasing fuel duty, but making government departments make 2% worth of savings.
Yeah.
That's a crazy choice.
Because who's going to slip? It's the people who are going to slip through the cracks of these systems if they're not, and also motorists can pollute. Do you know how much it was? Do you know how much it was? 3 peak return train tickets to Swindon.
Services.
1 second. Three peak
train tickets to Swindon return from London to Swindon.
Total.
Yep.
250 quid.
It's about £500.
You should have driven.
Which went at a different time. I saved the company hundreds of pounds.
£500 to go to Swindon.
Yeah.
No one wants to go to Swindon.
Absolutely.
Anyway.
Couldn't pay me.
In Curious Incident of the Dog in the Night Time, he calls Swindon the arsehole of the world.
Really?
Yeah.
Is that apt? Are you calling it Swindon?
No.
What's the arsehole of the world?
I quite like Swindon. Swindon Advertiser doesn't like me, local paper there.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Well, you incited...
Well, I reported on I included some racists in a documentary we made.
Whoa.
Yeah, let's go back. Let's cut to
hear?
it. Let's
Do you
cut
want
to
tell
it.
you what she just said?
Yeah.
Rachel Reeves announced at 1.1%, 1.2% in national insurance contributions, and the threshold at which companies will start making contributions, they've moved it from £9,100 to £5,000. That is crazy.
Oofed.
Okay, girl, get it. Girl.
Our constituents are watching. They need to be able to hear the Chancellor. Simmer down. Chancellor.
But in the circumstances that I have inherited, it is the right choice to make. Successful businesses depend on successful schools. Healthy businesses depend on a healthy NHS. And a strong economy depends on strong public finances. If the party opposite chooses to oppose this choice, then they are choosing more austerity, more chaos, more instability. This is the choice that our country faces too. As I make this choice, I know it is particularly important to protect our smallest companies. So, having heard representations from the Federation of Small Businesses and others, I am today increasing the employment allowance from £5,000 to £10,500. This means 865,000 employers won't pay any national insurance at all next year. And over 1 million will pay the same or less than they did previously. This will allow a small business to employ the equivalent of 4 full-time workers on the national living wage without paying any national insurance on their wages. Madam Deputy Speaker, let me now come to capital gains tax. We need to drive growth, promote entrepreneurship and support wealth creation, while raising the revenue required to fund our public services and restore our public finances. Today, we will increase the lower rate of capital gains tax from 10 to 18% and the higher rate from 20 to 24%, while maintaining the rates of capital gains tax on residential property at 18 and 24% too. This means the UK will still have the lowest capital gains tax rate of any European G7 economy. Alongside these changes to the headline rates of capital gains tax, we are maintaining the lifetime limit for business asset disposal relief at £1 million to encourage entrepreneurs to invest in their businesses. Business asset disposal relief will remain at 10% this year before rising to 14% in April 2025 and to 18% from 2026-27, maintaining a significant gap compared to the higher rate of capital gains tax. Together, the OBR say that these measures will raise £2.5 billion by the end of the forecast. In a sign of this government's commitment to supporting growth and entrepreneurship, we have already extended the Enterprise Investment Scheme and the Venture Capital Trust schemes to 2035, and we will continue to work with leading entrepreneurs and venture capital firms to ensure that our policies support a positive environment for entrepreneurship in the UK. Next, inheritance tax. Only 6% of estates will pay inheritance tax this year. I understand the strongly held desire to pass down savings to children and grandchildren, so I am taking a balanced approach in my package today. First, the previous government froze inheritance tax thresholds until 2028. I will extend that freeze for a further 2 years until 2030. That means the first £325,000 of any estate can be inherited tax-free, rising to £500,000 if the estate includes a residence passed to direct descendants, and £1 million when a tax-free allowance is passed to a surviving spouse or civil partner. Second, we will close the loophole created by the previous government, made even bigger when the lifetime allowance was abolished, by bringing inherited pensions into inheritance tax from April 2027. Finally, we will reform agricultural property relief and business property relief. From April 2026, the first £1 million of combined business and agricultural assets will continue to attract no inheritance tax at all. But for assets over £1 million, inheritance tax will apply with a 50% relief at an effective rate of 20%. This will ensure that we continue to protect small family farms and with three-quarters of claims unaffected by these changes. I can also announce that we will apply a 50% relief in all circumstances on inheritance tax for shares on the alternative investment market and other similar markets, setting the effective rate of tax at 20%. Taken together, these measures raise over £2 billion by the final year of the forecast. Next, I can confirm that the government will renew the tobacco duty escalator for the remainder of this Parliament at RPI plus 2%, increase duty by a further 10% on hand-rolling tobacco this year, introduce a flat rate duty on all vaping liquid from October 2026, alongside an additional one-off increase in tobacco duty to maintain the incentive to give up smoking. And we will increase the soft drinks industry levy to account for inflation since it was introduced, as well as increasing the duty in line with CPI each year going forward. These measures will raise nearly £1 billion per year by the end of the forecast period. Madam Deputy Speaker, we want to support the take-up of electric vehicles, so I will maintain the incentives for electric vehicles in company car tax from 2020.
Nice little tax for you there, Ava.
Ed Campbell wins again in this budget.
Yeah,
It's looking pretty rosy.
As I'm a Mormon, and that soft drinks tax levy is going to be brought in line with inflation.
Why would you put a duty on e-liquid for vapes? Why would you do that?
They don't want you to vape, old bean.
But it's better than smoking.
Is it?
Because
Is that
I guess
true?
what you could do, the fuel duty's frozen on petrol, so why don't you just get petrol, fill that in your vape, and smoke that
Or everyone could
instead?
just grow up
We know
and
that-
not use nicotine. It's pretty easy.
You are insufferable sometimes. Why would anyone have a good time? Why do you enjoy yourself?
I love getting out of my head on cigarettes.
Yeah. How many grams of protein have you had today, pal?
Oh, tax that. Fucking duty on fucking protein shakes.
Yeah. In the corner of the room.
No one-
Slunging fuel.
They're slonging
on
fuel,
his back.
smoking their vapes. Bad news.
That farm stuff is bad, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
She is increasing air.
For a private jet to say California?
The stuff on farms is bad. Like, on any farm over 75 acres, you need a farm bigger than 75 acres, basically, to support a family.
Mm-hmm.
So, your estate's going to get broken up, basically. Bad. Bad. Bad.
The problem was that a lot of wealthy people were using that, weren't they, to escape inheritance tax. They were using it as a loophole.
They were, but I mean, those farms stay in those families, and quite often the kids continue farming.
Mm-hmm.
Nepo farmers.
Also, no one wants to do it. Like, farming's hard.
Yeah, exactly.
Which I think people don't realise how difficult farming actually
Oh, no,
is.
I do, pal. That's why I live in the city.
I also wasn't suggesting that you don't know. I was saying, like, there's a reason that people just don't set up farms and become,
I went
like,
to a farm in
millionaire.
Bristol over the weekend. They just had chickens running about. I couldn't believe it.
That sounds
I
horrendous.
thought it was a mistake. I thought they'd been let out. Say that again.
A penny off pints in the pub, that was.
That's one for the workers.
One for the Sun.
Do you
One
know
for the front
people-
page of the Sun.
Yep.
A penny off your pint, fellas.
You know that will actually be for the Sun.
Yeah, of
And
course
for,
it will.
Not even joking,
sorry,
it's literally for
let's
the
not be
Sun.
disingenuous. It's one for the PoliticsJOE Instagram. We've posted great news. Your pint is cheaper before.
Yeah. Forget the fiscal drag that means you're going to pay a whole host more tax. Your pint is a penny cheaper.
Oh, it's for the Sun and for PoliticsJOE. The two places you should get your news.
Should we dip back in?
A penny off a pint is actually quite a bit.
Lowest in the G7 for the duration of this Parliament, while maintaining full expensing and the £1 million annual investment allowance, and keeping the current rates of research and development relief to drive innovation. Madam Deputy Speaker, in our manifesto, we made a number of commitments to raise funding for our public services. First, I have always said that if you make Britain your home, you should pay your taxes here too. So today I can confirm we will abolish the non-dom tax regime. And we will remove the outdated concept of domicile from the tax system from April 2025. We will introduce a new residence-based scheme with internationally competitive arrangements for those coming to the UK on a temporary basis, while closing the loopholes in the scheme designed by the party opposite. To further encourage investment into the UK, we will also extend the temporary repatriation relief to 3 years and expand its scope, bringing billions of pounds of new funds into Britain. The Independent Office for Budget Responsibility say that this package of measures will raise £12.7 billion over the next 5 years. Next, the fund management industry provides a vital contribution to our economy. But as our manifesto set out, there needs to be a fairer approach to the way that carried interest is taxed. So we will increase the capital gains rates on carried interest to 32% from April 2025. And from April 2026, we will deliver further reform to ensure that the specific rules for carried interest are simpler, fairer and better targeted. In our manifesto, we committed to reforming stamp duty land tax to raise revenues while supporting those buying their first home. We are increasing the stamp duty land tax surcharge for second homes, known as the higher rate for additional dwellings, by 2 percentage points to 5%, which will come into effect from tomorrow. This will support over 130,000 additional transactions from people buying their first home or moving home over the next 5 years. Next, we are committed to reform the energy profits levy on oil and gas companies. I can confirm today that we will increase the rate of the levy to 38%, which will now expire in March 2030, and we will remove the 29% investment allowance to ensure that the oil and gas industry can protect jobs and support our energy security. So we will maintain the 100% first-year allowances and the decarbonisation allowances too. Finally, 94% of children in the UK attend state schools. To provide the highest quality of support and teaching that they deserve, we will introduce VAT on private school fees from January 2025. And we will shortly introduce legislation to remove their business rates relief from April 2025 too. We said in our manifesto that these changes, alongside our measures to tackle tax avoidance, would bring in £8.5 billion in the final year of the forecast. I can confirm today that they will in fact raise over £9 billion to support our public services and restore our public finances. That is a promise made and a promise fulfilled. Madam Deputy Speaker, I have one final decision to take on tax today. The previous government froze income tax and national insurance thresholds in 2021, and then they did so again after the mini-budget. Extending their threshold freeze for a further 2 years raises billions of pounds, money to deal with the black hole in our public finances and repair our public services. Having considered this issue closely, I have come to the conclusion that extending the threshold freeze would hurt working people. It would take more money out of their payslips. I am keeping every single promise on tax that I made in our manifesto. So there will be no extension of the freeze in income tax and national insurance thresholds beyond the decisions by the previous government. From 2028-29, personal tax thresholds will be uprated in line with inflation once again. When it comes to choices on tax, this government chooses to protect working people every single time. Madam Deputy Speaker, these are the choices I have made.
On the freezing of income tax thresholds, I had assumed, and it had been widely reported, that that freeze was going to be maintained.
Yes.
And that was what my fiscal drag comment was about earlier. But she's just said she's not going to do it.
So no fiscal drag?
Well, it's being maintained for what the last government committed to, but she's going to uprate them in line with inflation after that. So,
Tom's having a dreadful time.
Someone's... Oh, no, he's okay. He's okay.
Thanks, you.
He just dropped something, did he?
Behind Starmer.
He dropped this.
It's a crown.
Yeah.
Here you are, king. Do you think she's kept her manifesto pledges on tax? Do you think that's fair?
Not the spirit, I would say.
40 billion quid in tax rises. Cash terms.
That's a big number, but it's not going to be paid by people on PAYE. That's the only thing that she has actually, you could argue, reneged on is by not moving those thresholds until 28-29, because that means that a lot of people will be dragged into the next tax bracket.
Before then, yeah.
But you know, these national. I thought what she had to say about small businesses and these national insurance contributions, for small businesses will now be able to hire someone on the new national living wage, and because she's moved the threshold at which you start paying national insurance, it means they'll have no cost difference to bringing in a new employee. That's really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So she really is going after the broader shoulders here and not the small businesses.
Do you think this was an interesting bit of politicking? Because there's criticism for not having a budget in the summer, and it's been gone on for so long that the speculation has grown and grown and grown and grown, and put like the right wing and the Conservative Party and business interests into an absolute tizzy. And now it's just nowhere near as bad. Say that's 100% on the scale, whatever was projected, and now she's at 85%, 90%. And so is there just going to be some relief in the business community now?
I'm not necessarily sure there'll be relief.
But if she's worked with the small federation of businesses, and
less dread,
yeah. But if she's followed the advice that they've given to her, which was 6.7%, and also raising the thresholds, then she's happy with them. Big businesses, she's already said that. I mean, did you notice the wording on the non-dom? What they're going to do about non-doms?
They said they were going to deport Akshata Murthy, didn't they?
They did, which I thought was outrageous. But then she did say that we're going to make them attractive and competitive. So if you're a company who likes to offshore, I'd probably listen to that. And I'd probably think, do you know what, we might pay a little bit more NI, but we can put the rest offshore.
I think there's going to be a fair amount of offshoring, yeah. Should we dip back to Rachel?
Yeah.
I am today providing a £1 billion uplift in funding, a 6% real terms increase from this year. There is no more important job for government than to keep our country safe, and we are conducting a strategic defence review to be published next year. And as set out in our manifesto, we will set a path to spending 2.5% of GDP on defence at a future fiscal event. Today, I am announcing a total increase to the Ministry of Defence's budget of £2.9 billion next year, ensuring that the UK comfortably exceeds our NATO commitments and providing guaranteed military support to Ukraine of £3 billion per year for as long as it takes. Last week, alongside my right honourable friend, the Defence Secretary, I announced in addition to this further support to Ukraine on top of our NATO commitment through our £2.26 billion contribution to the G7's Extraordinary Revenue Acceleration Agreement, repaid using profits from immobilised Russian sovereign assets. And as we approach Remembrance Sunday, it is vital that we take time to remember those who have served our country so bravely. So I am today announcing funding to commemorate the 80th anniversary of VE and VJ Day next year, to honour those who have served at home and abroad. We must also remember those who experienced the atrocities of the Nazi regime firsthand. I would like to pay tribute to Lily Ebert, the Holocaust survivor and educator who passed away aged 100 earlier this month. I am today committing a further £2 million to Holocaust education next year, so that charities like the Holocaust Educational Trust can continue their work to ensure that these vital testimonies are not lost and are preserved for the future. Madam Deputy Speaker, to repair our public services, we also need to work alongside our mayors and local leaders. We will deliver a significant real terms funding increase for local governments next year, including £1.3 billion of additional grant funding to deliver essential services, with at least £600 million in grant funding for social care and £230 million to tackle homelessness and rough sleeping. We are today confirming that Greater Manchester and the West Midlands will be the first mayoral authorities to receive integrated settlements from next year, giving mayors meaningful control of the funding for their local areas. And to support our high streets, we are taking action to deal with the sharp rise in shoplifting that we have seen in recent years. We will scrap the effective immunity for low-value shoplifting introduced by the party opposite, and And having listened closely to organisations like the British Retail Consortium and the trade union USDOR, I am providing additional funding to crack down on the organised gangs which target retailers and to provide more training to our police officers and retailers to stop shoplifting in its tracks. Finally, I am today providing funding to support public services and drive growth across Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. Having discussed the matter with the First Minister of Wales, Eluned Morgan, and my honourable friends for Llanelli and Pontypridd, I am today providing £25 million to the Welsh Government next year for the maintenance of coal tips to ensure that we keep our communities safe. And to support growth, including in our rural areas, we will proceed with city and growth deals in Northern Ireland, in Causeway Coast and Glens, and the Mid-South West. And we will drive growth in Scotland, a key priority for Scottish Labour and our leader Anna Sawar, including with a city and growth deal in Argyll and Bute. This budget provides the devolved governments with the largest real terms funding settlements since devolution, delivering an additional £3.4 billion to the Scottish Government through the Barnett formula. Funding which must now be used effectively in Scotland to deliver the public services that the people of Scotland deserve. This budget also provides £1.7 billion to the Welsh Government and £1.5 billion to the Northern Ireland Executive in 2025-26. I said that there would be no return to austerity, and that is the choice that I have made today. Madam Deputy Speaker, to rebuild our country, we need to increase investment. The UK lags behind every other G7 country when it comes to business investment as a share of our economy. That matters. It means the UK has fallen behind in the race for new jobs, new industries and new technology. By restoring economic stability and by establishing the National Wealth Fund to catalyse private funding, we have begun to create the conditions that businesses need to invest. But there is also a significant role for public investment. For too long, we have seen Conservative Chancellors cut investment and raid capital budgets to plug gaps in day-to-day spending. The result is clear for all to see. Hospitals without the equipment they need. School buildings not fit for our children. A desperate lack of affordable housing. Economic growth held back at every turn. Under the plans I inherited, public investment was set to fall from 2.5% to 1.7% of GDP. But in Washington last week, the International Monetary Fund were clear. More public investment is badly needed in the UK. So having listened to the case made by the former Governor of the Bank of England, Mark Carney, former Treasury Minister Jim O'Neill, and the former Cabinet Secretary Gus O'Donnell, among others, I am confirming our investment rule. As set out in our manifesto, we will target debt falling as a share of the economy. Debt will be defined as public sector net financial liabilities, or net financial debt for short, a metric that has been measured by the Office for National Statistics since 2016 and forecast by the Office of Budget Responsibility since that date too. Net financial debt recognises that government investment delivers returns for taxpayers. By counting not just the liabilities on a government's balance sheet, but the financial assets too. This means that we count the benefits of that investment, not just the costs. And we free up our institutions to invest, just as they do in Germany, France and Japan. Like our stability rule, our investment rule will apply in 2029-2030, until that becomes the third year of the forecast. From that point onwards, net financial debt will fall in the third year of every forecast. Today, the OBR say that we are already meeting our target 2 years early. with net financial debt falling by 2027-28, with £15.7 billion of headroom in the final year. So that we drive the right incentives in government investments, we will introduce 4 key guardrails to ensure capital spending is good value for money and drives growth in our economy. First, our portfolio of new financial investments will be delivered by expert bodies like the National Wealth Fund, which must, by default, earn a rate of return at least as large as that on gilts. Second, we will strengthen the role of institutions to improve infrastructure delivery. Third, we will improve certainty, setting capital budgets for 5 years and extending them at every spending review every 2 years. Finally, we will ensure that there is greater transparency for capital spending, with robust annual reporting of financial investments based on accounts audited by the National Audit Office and made available to the Office for Budget Responsibility at every forecast. Taken together with our stability rule, these fiscal rules will ensure that our public finances are on a firm footing, while enabling us to invest prudently alongside business. The capital plans that I now set out to drive growth across our country and repair the fabric of our nation are only possible because of our investment rule. Let me set out those investment plans. Today, we are confirming our plans to capitalise the National Wealth Fund to invest in the industries of the future, from gigafactories to ports to green hydrogen. Building on these investments, my right honourable friend, the Business Secretary, is driving forward our modern industrial strategy. Working with businesses and organisations like Make UK to set out the sectors with the biggest growth potential. Today, we are confirming multi-year funding commitments for these areas of our economy, including nearly £1 billion for the aerospace sector to fund vital research and development, building on our industry in the East Midlands, the South West and in Scotland. Over £2 billion for the automotive sector to support our electric vehicle industry and develop our manufacturing base, building on our strengths in the North East and the West Midlands. And up to £520 million for a new Life Sciences Innovative Manufacturing Fund. For our world-leading creative industries, we will legislate to provide additional tax relief for visual effect costs in TV and film. And we are providing £25 million for the North East Combined Authority, which they plan to use to remediate the Crownworks studio site in Sunderland, creating 8,000 new jobs. To unlock these growth industries of the future, we will protect government investment in research and development with more than £20 billion worth of funding. This includes at least £6.1 billion to protect core research funding for areas like engineering, biotechnology and medical science. Through Research England, other research councils and the national academies. We will extend the Innovation Accelerators programme in Glasgow, in Manchester and in the West Midlands. And with over £500 million of funding next year, my right honourable friend, the Science, Technology and Innovation Secretary, will continue to drive progress in improving reliable, fast broadband and mobile coverage across our country, including in rural areas. We committed in our manifesto to build 1.5 million homes over the course of this Parliament. And my right honourable friend, the Deputy Prime Minister, is driving that work forward across government. Today, I am providing over £5 billion of government investment to deliver our plans on housing next year. We will increase the Affordable Homes programme to £3.1 billion, delivering thousands of new homes. We will provide £3 billion worth of support in guarantees to boost the supply of homes and support our small house builders. And we will provide investment to renovate sites across our country, including at Liverpool Central Docks, where we will deliver 2,000 new homes, and funding to help Cambridge realise its full growth potential. Alongside this investment, we will put the right policies in place to increase the supply of affordable housing. Having heard representations from local authorities, social housing providers and from Shelter, I can today confirm that the government will reduce right-to-buy discounts and local authorities will be able to retain the full receipts from any sales of social housing so that we can reinvest them back into the housing stock and into new supply. By doing this, we will give more people a safe, secure and affordable place to live. We will provide stability to social housing providers with a social housing rent settlement of CPI plus 1% for the next 5 years. And we will deliver on our manifesto commitment to hire hundreds of new planning officers to get Britain building again. We will also make progress on our commitment to accelerate the remediation of homes following the findings of the Grenfell inquiry, with £1 billion of investment to remove dangerous cladding next year. The last government made a number of promises on
1.5 million new homes in this Parliament, Ava. The Centre for Cities said that there's been a shortfall of house building in Britain since the end of the Second World War compared to our European neighbours of 4.4 million homes. Tory house building targets were pretty close to 1.5 million, lower, but Labour has increased it. Do you think what the Labour Party is pledging on house building meets the scale of the challenge?
Well, I mean, I think that's an oversimplification of the question, right? Because it's very easy to say we need to build more houses, isn't it? But it's the planning and it's the building supplies and all that sort of thing. But what they've said about stamp duty is very interesting, because if they've increased stamp duty on buy-to-lets from 3 to 5%, then that might encourage landlords to chill out and stop buying everything, and that could help first-time buyers. Do you know there are around 700,000 empty homes that are just totally empty? I don't know why they don't tax those homes. If you've got an empty home in somewhere like London, tax it so that you sell it, and then you don't have to build anything new. You've already got the building.
So essentially, you increase the stamp duty to make landlords
less attractive to do a buy-to-let.
Leave buy-to-lets and you free up housing stock in that way.
A landlord I spoke to today suggested that only so-called amateur landlords would be frightened off by that. They're the ones leaving the market.
They ain't got the minerals.
They don't have the minerals, but someone who inherits property.
They don't know about their yields.
So you know, like accidental landlords, like someone who inherits the property.
Accidental landlords. I'm sorry.
No,
there's no buy-in.
No,
I know you don't.
there's not. Like, but he said he has a very someone. He said if you're a landlord, you should be doing qualifications, upskilling, so you can be like a professional, good landlord. Every landlord you talk to says they are a good landlord, but I think he was making the point the bad landlords are people who don't take it seriously. It's not their full-time earnings, it's not their full-time income, so they have different priorities. And if it's harder to get into the business, maybe it'll scare off rogue landlords from even entering it at all.
It's quite hot, isn't it?
Yeah, look, I think
Where's Jez Athwell? We should ask him for comment.
we should ask him about what he makes of that. Yeah, look, it's a combination of things, isn't it? You need to free up housing supply. You need dramatically more council houses. 1.5 million doesn't touch the sides. It's basically the problem, isn't it? There's a ginormous shortfall. But it's a start. So much of this for me is like, it's a start. Do you know? It's like...
It was the start of the government.
I was in an MP's office a couple of weeks ago, and he was showing where all the new homes in his constituency were going to go, or what he wants to do, what he's put in. And he's looking at the map, and he's literally like, boom, boom, boom. And he looks and he goes, I'm going to be a single-term MP. It's so unpopular.
Yeah, deal with it, I guess.
People like the abstract, but hate the specific.
What I do find interesting is if you don't like something being built in your area, if it's spoiling what you enjoy, or you just don't like being there anymore, you do have the option to move, which is what renters have to do. You know, if you no longer can afford your rent, or I don't know, they decide that they're going to put a bonfire, what they're called? Dump next to your house, then you move, right? But for some reason, homeowners, they're like, well, I can't afford my mortgage anymore, so the government should bail me out? No, you've got to move. Try and understand what it's like to live in the transient class.
Yeah.
Who's the best landlord you've ever had? Should we do some shout-outs?
I don't think I've ever had a good landlord. I've had a landlord who wanted to come round to my house and do spot checks on cleanliness.
Yep.
I had
without the 24 hours notice, presumably.
Yeah, absolutely. I had a builder, a sort of like I think they were Canada-based, sort of like investment firm who built this block of flats, and it was a new build, and the quality, it was all broken. It was terrible. They had to pull up all the flooring because it was a ginormous leak. My student landlord wouldn't let me live in the flat over the summer that I was renting.
That's crazy.
What?
Yeah, he said he needed to do building repairs, so couldn't live in it.
But you still have the lease?
Yeah.
That is nuts.
You know how they'll charge you half rent? Some of them do anyway, over the summer. His argument was, the reason I charge you half rent over the summer is because you're not allowed to live in there.
You
But obviously,
paid not to live there?
well, exactly. And the contract obviously doesn't say anything about not living there. But yeah. So, I haven't had a good landlord.
It would be void as a contract. That's absolutely insane. I think my best ones have been my current one. I'm coming to the end of my time there. I shout out her. Although I do pay her £thousands in cash every 3 months. It's the most illegal, but the best landlord I've had. I think that's why. I think it's high risk.
I've been in I've been in one fully legal property.
Really?
Yeah. But everywhere else I've lived, I've gone, this is a bit on edge. This is a bit on the line here.
I'm moving in. This is not very upset conscious of me. I'm moving in with my friend on Friday. He owned the flat and he's got a spare room. And I asked him, I was setting up the standing order, and he told me how much rent I'm going to pay him. And I was like, I'm going to kiss you on the mouth.
Yeah, maybe I'll
That's
kiss
a
him on the mouth
phenomenal
and I'll
number.
live there instead.
Ava shagging her way into your tenancy.
If I wanted to shag my way into a home, I would have done
He
it
would-
already.
he's a very
Okay,
good
I'm
friend.
doing this shit by myself, all right? Until I get bored.
And my
I
friendship
keep saying
is
I've got
much
2 more
stronger.
years to make a decision about whether I still want to stick with the career or I just want to go and be a trophy wife.
Right on.
Yeah.
Sister.
That's my choice as a feminist.
Absolutely.
Should
Scotland.
we talk about what was in there?
Ed, Scotland. That announcement on
Scotland.
Scotland. You said that's a red rag to a bull. What did you mean by
I
that?
said, so, pre-election, during the election, Anna Sarwar said, read my lips, no austerity. And with the trailing of this budget, the SNP have at every opportunity lambasted Anna Sarwar and the Labour Party for things being described as austerity measures. But now they've been given the biggest funding settlement. The Scottish Government have been giving the biggest funding settlement since devolution. So they're getting 1.5 billion this year, 3.4 billion next year. Those are not small numbers. And so they're passing, they're giving, it's quite an interesting political thing in that they're giving the Scottish Government more money and it's up to them how they spend it. So if public services are not improving in Scotland, which they are in a pretty dire state anyway, the SNP are no longer able to go, well, it's Westminster's fault. If they've they've been crying out, that was during the Conservative government. If things like education levels were not performing as well as England, it's like, well, we're in austerity. That's the measures. We've not been getting enough funding, but now they've been given. It's play ball is the instruction from Labour government. Put your money where your mouth is.
A lot of the debate around this, about whether or not this constitutes a return to austerity, has focused on spending cuts, right? But austerity means, like its literal definition, is economic measures which could be spending cuts, could be tax rises, with a view to eliminating or reducing a budget deficit. And I think the argument goes, well, a lot of spending cuts actually kind of sticking around. They're certainly not reversing everything that's happened in the last 14 years. But if you are implementing 40 billion pounds worth of tax rises, that is still austerity. It's just by a different mechanism.
I think, given the definition, they're not implementing the same. It's not Osborneomics, is it?
Well, it depends, doesn't it? If you
I think
want to
you're
reduce
changing-
Osborne economics to austerity, or someone's economic program doesn't constitute Osborne economics if it doesn't implement austerity. If that's slightly reductive, right? But if it is just a point about austerity, then it's a yes.
I wonder if are you moving the goalposts by using that definition?
I mean, I haven't just made that up.
No, I know you haven't. I know, but in terms of policy,
yeah, like it has a different flavour to it, right? I guess you say like the methods of achieving the ends are different, but if the ends are the same, does it matter?
Mm-hmm. I'd just like you to be fair to Rachel Reeves.
Be fair to Rachel Reeves. Ava, a continuation of austerity, a difference? How do you interpret? Oh, fucking hell, they look pissed off, don't they?
Why are they pissed off, Laura?
Yeah, what's being said? There was some anger there.
If you don't know, it's fine.
No idea.
Laura checked out.
Fucking hell.
Laura's not here.
Yeah.
No one's here. No one's here. NHS. Okay, well, should we cut back to it then? Should we listen? Yeah, go back to it.
This year and next. This is the largest real terms growth in day-to-day NHS spending outside of COVID since 2010. Let me set out what this funding is delivering. Many NHS buildings have been left in a state of disrepair. So we will provide £1 billion of health capital investment next year to address the backlog of repairs and upgrades across our NHS. To increase capacity for tens of thousands more procedures next year, we will provide a further £1.5 billion for new beds in hospitals across our country, new capacity for over 1 million additional diagnostic tests, and new surgical hubs and diagnostic centres, so that people waiting for their treatment can get it as quickly as possible. My right honourable friend, the Health Secretary, will be setting out further details of his review into the new hospital programme in the coming weeks and publishing in the new year. But I can tell the House today that work will continue at pace to deliver those 7 hospitals affected by the RAC crisis, including West Suffolk Hospital in Bury St Edmunds and Leighton Hospital in Crewe. And finally, because of this record injection of funding, because of the thousands of additional beds that we have secured, and because of the reforms that we are delivering in our NHS, we can now begin to bring waiting lists down more quickly and move towards our target for waiting times to be no longer than 18 weeks. By delivering on our manifesto commitment for 40,000 extra hospital appointments a week, that is the difference that this Labour government is making. Madam Deputy Speaker, the choices I have made today are the right choices for our country. To restore stability to our public finances, to protect working people, to fix our NHS, and to rebuild Britain. That doesn't mean these choices are easy, but they are responsible. If the party opposite disagrees with the choices that I have made, then they must answer. What choices would they make? Would they again choose the path of irresponsibility, the path taken by Liz Truss, and ignore the problems in our public finances altogether? If that is their choice, they should say so. But let me be clear. If they disagree with my choices on tax, then they would not be able to protect working people. If they disagree with our plans to fund public services, then they would have to cut schools and hospitals. And if they disagree with our investment rule, then they would have to delay or cancel thousands of projects which drive growth across our country. This is a moment of fundamental choice for Britain. I have made my choices, the responsible choices, to restore stability to our country, to protect working people. More teachers in our schools, more appointments in our NHS, more homes being built, fixing the foundations of our economy, investing in our future, delivering change, rebuilding Britain. We on these benches commend those choices, and I commend this statement to the House.
Should we not stand and applaud our first girl boss Chancellor?
Do you feel emancipated now as a woman, Ava?
The last time we took a break, I said I've got 2 years to decide whether I want to keep working or if I want to be a trophy wife.
You're lowering the glass ceiling, actually.
Has Rachel Reeves inspired you to girl boss harder?
What do you mean? Like what?
As the first female Chancellor of the Exchequer?
What's like cut spending?
To deliver a girl boss budget. Yeah, do you know what's funny? We were talking about austerity when we cut back, and then she's like, yeah, we're giving £22.5 billion to the NHS. It's pretty punchy, isn't it?
Because she must have heard you.
Yes, yeah. The reach of Paul Joe Towers extends far.
Day-to-day spending. It's very exciting, isn't it?
Yeah,
every single day, 22
Yeah, and 3 billion capital as well. It's big.
Yeah.
Ava, why isn't Lindsay Hoyle the Speaker in the Speaker's chair right now?
It's the most senior deputy delivers the
budget.
Yes.
Is that a tradition? Is it?
It is a tradition. It's also a tradition for the Chancellor to have a drink.
She had water.
But
like a boozy drink.
Yeah.
Drink, yeah.
And guess which boring Presbyterian got rid of it?
Don't talk about him like that.
What? I think it's not a really apt description of Gordon Brown.
Gordon Brown is a paragon of charisma, vibes, and charm.
And he's the most charismatic man.
Yes, ever to have existed. Yeah.
Do you know? Imagine us doing this show during the time where Peter Mandelson was allegedly briefing against Gordon Brown that he was gay.
We've had a good old
We'd
time
have had
with
fun, and we should do like a throwback episode, like a reaction to like the new Labour years.
Yeah. What year should we do?
Like 99 or something.
What would you drink at the dispatch box?
A case cider.
Legend. Yeah.
Yeah, that's how it works.
Yeah. Leader of the opposition goes back on
Ollie
the
already
budget.
revealed that to us.
A nice
Thanks
case
for your
cider to
contribution,
appeal
Sean.
to the working man.
Dragon soup.
Oh, I like a dragon soup's.
What is dragon soup?
It's like a caffeinated, like, boozy energy drink. They actually kind of send you to like the site. What's the American one?
Hey, that would be double whammy hit by this budget, wouldn't it? Because surely it's got a lot of sugar in it.
Sugar, caffeine.
What's the American one? The American like.
Oh, a Four Loko.
Yes, it's like a Four
Yeah,
Loko.
okay.
It's like a Four Loko.
I don't know what I would drink. Because I wouldn't want a pint, because as you just seen, she spoke for an hour there, and I
Be warm.
Yeah, that's it.
You need more than one. Is that what you're going to say?
I'd need to pee.
That'd be tough.
What happens if you need to piss during the budget?
There's actually...
You piss yourself.
You see the box
just do it.
that's in front of them, the dispatch box?
Yeah.
It's called that because you can dispatch into it.
And it's also what's actually now that Reeves is Chancellor, they had to install a shiwi into the urinal.
Didn't she have the urinal pulled out?
I don't know. They can't do that, can you? It's not like,
Or did they put it in a glass box or something?
It's presumably listed.
The urinal.
Yeah, there's a
urinal
urinal in the Chancellor's
Yeah,
office.
but no, I'm shocked that it's listed.
But I mean, just like you can't just like rip things out of Parliament, can you?
Why? Because what former chancellors have pissed in it?
That's probably that's
We need to chill out as a country.
Nigel Lawson's been in there. That's a
She
piece
took
of,
Nigel
piece of
Lawson's
art.
portrait down.
Did she replace it with a picture of a communist?
Yeah,
Fucking right on, sister.
I think she was also the first female education secretary, and also a founding member of the Communist Party of Great Britain.
Also, it's just like, of course.
The landlords didn't like that.
Education Secretary.
The landlords didn't like the communist in Rachel Reeves' office. Did they talk about it?
That had
unprompted. One guy said, okay, this guy was great. Tony said, asked about Keir Starmer's definition of a working person. His answer was, well, he doesn't know the difference between a man and a woman.
Nice.
So,
nice.
There was that. He talked about.
What has that got to do with a buy-to-let?
I think nothing really.
Oh, let's go back. This is hot.
Let's go spunk.
First time buyer stamp duty up. Pensions tax up. They have fiddled the figures. Deputy Speaker.
Order. The public will also want to hear what the Leader of the Opposition has to say. And shouting whilst I can see you will mean that you will not be called to speak later on. Simmer.
They don't like it, but this is the truth. They have fiddled the figures. They have raised tax to record levels. They have broken their promises, and it is the working people of this country that are going to pay the price. Now, Madam Deputy Speaker, the Chancellor and Prime Minister have tried to say that they had no choice. But be in no doubt, their misleading claims about the state of the economy are nothing but a cynical political device. Today's situation is a world away from the genuinely bleak legacy that we Conservatives inherited from the last Labour government. Borrowing. The Chancellor forgot to point out, borrowing £1 in every 4 that they spent. Debt rising every year and unemployment at 8%. Now,
I don't know if viewers noticed the brown envelope being passed around the Tory backbenches.
This is open, blatant corruption amongst MPs.
Yeah.
There's thousands of pounds of cash in there.
Either a COVID contract or it's your rent making its way to your landlord on the Tory front benches.
My landlord's Kevin Badenoch.
I have never seen this version of Rishi Sunak.
No.
I have never seen this before.
Well, it's a trying time for him, isn't it? Because
he's losing his job.
Look at Laura Trott. She's going as well.
He's out of a job, and he's also, he's actually made it impossible for his wife to smuggle money into the country.
Look at them! Look at them! Look at Jeremy Hunt!
Did he go back in?
Do you think he's this angry because Akshata has said to him, they're going to kick me out of the country, Rishi?
Right, listen to me. I let you take the first joke off of him.
Yeah?
I'll sit here and take the second joke as well.
You just said you wanted to throw back to him. This is your time. Make the joke.
No.
Okay, as I just said before. He's only upset because Ashkan has been this morning.
Oh, the old ball and chain.
Look at you, unemployed.
You need to get off your arse and get a job.
Yeah.
Or a hobby. Do you think Rishi Sunak is going down like the men's shed?
Do you think this is just him unleashed? He knows he's not going to be leader of the opposition anymore. He's abandoned pretense.
This is his legacy. This is his attempt at a legacy.
Maybe this is the last time he'll ever be on Hansard.
This will be when he dies. This will be in his obituary film.
Yeah.
No, it won't. It'll be when it rains.
Oh yeah.
Oh, that was good. Yeah. Yeah. No, I'm talking rubbish. I wouldn't include that.
No one for Halloween yet has gone as him, rain-soaked, and then as like a non-dom. Like you could go as like a dominatrix, but like in pink with like a fluffy whip or something.
Mm-hmm.
Get it? Like non-dom.
Yeah, people are too busy going as Hog Tour.
And the Rizzler.
There's not people don't have enough brains anymore.
I once went as the Brexit bus, and I think if I timed that better and done it a year later, it would have cut through. But everyone looked at me and was like, "So you're like a bus?"
Good work.
And I was like, "What do you mean? I've painted 350 million on myself. How can you not see it?"
That's a good costume.
Thank you.
Should we go back and take some more Rishi?
even further, Madam Deputy Speaker. And when I made the tough choices to fix the public finances afterwards, the Prime Minister and Chancellor opportunistically opposed me every step of the way. So I will take no lectures from those two about difficult decisions. But because of those decisions that we made, the Chancellor inherited lower borrowing than France, America, Italy and Japan, and the second lowest debt in the entire G7. So any which way you look at it, Labour's claims about their inheritance are purely ludicrous. These are her choices, so stop blaming everyone else and take responsibility for them. Now, let me turn to the substance of those choices. During the election, the Chancellor repeatedly promised that her plans were fully funded. Only a few weeks ago, The Prime Minister said the budget would balance the books. But this budget does no such thing and reveals they have not been straight with the British people.
Oh, come on. I can see you, even when you're hiding behind another colleague.
No.
Yelling across the chamber is not on. The public and our constituents are watching. I know emotions are high, and I expect some noise, but have the confidence to shout closer, and I will definitely call you out. Leader of the Opposition.
A few weeks ago, the Prime Minister said the budget would balance the books. But this budget does no such thing and reveals that they haven't been straight with the British people, because today the Chancellor has launched an enormous borrowing spree, saddling our children and grandchildren with billions upon billions pounds more debt, pushing up interest rates, leaving our economy more exposed to future shocks, and leading the OBR today to now forecast higher inflation in every year of the forecast. And her decision to let borrowing rip make a total nonsense of her claims on the state of the public finances. Because if they truly were in such a dire strait, as she has said, what we should have seen today is a significant reduction in borrowing to repair them, not the splurge that she's just unleashed, Madam Deputy Speaker. Instead, what we see today, borrowing higher in every year of the forecast, debt higher in every year of the forecast. Now she has tried to cover up that splurge by fiddling the fiscal rules. According to the Institute of Fiscal Studies, the new measure will not actually even be a constraint on the amount she can borrow. And it is hard to escape the suspicion, they say, that the government is attracted to this change by the fact that it would allow for significantly more borrowing without any need for tough choices elsewhere. Fiscal fiddling is what they have called it. And the Chancellor herself actually agrees, because she specifically told the British people she wouldn't change the debt target. Because, and I quote, she said, "I'm not going to fiddle the figures to get better results." But that is exactly what she has done. She has gone back on her word and fiddled the figures so that she can borrow billions more. Broken promise after broken promise, and working people will pay the price. Now, the reason the Chancellor has increased borrowing and increased taxes is because she has totally failed to grip public spending. First, she has no meaningful plan. First, she has no meaningful plan to deliver the £20 billion worth of savings available if the public sector returned simply to its pre-pandemic levels of productivity. Instead, one of the first things the Chancellor did was to hand out inflation-busting pay rises to the unions without getting any productivity-enhancing reforms in return. The Chancellor also scrapped her predecessor's plan to get the civil service back to its pre-pandemic numbers. She doesn't seem to think that the civil service can be reduced by a single person. And the Chancellor has no plan to control welfare spending.
Rishi Sunak is furious.
Absolutely.
He's furious. I have never seen him speak like this. He thinks the Labour Party are fiddling the budget, fiddling the figures. He's very keen to say that. And talking a lot about tax rises. To name but a few, he did that little naming things, and then everyone went up.
Yep.
Afterwards,
Especially they don't like it.
They don't like it.
They
up
don't
'em.
like it up 'em.
They don't up. They don't like it up. Mr. Speaker, if he says anything else of interest, we will come back. But maybe we should just restock and recap Ava Santina about what we have heard today from Rachel Reeves and the contents of her budget.
£40 billion tax rate. £25 billion of that, the lion's share, is going to come from employers' national insurance contributions, the percentage of which is higher. than we thought it was going to be. However, it's not going to be paid by many small businesses. And she's tinkered with the thresholds, which means if you're a big conglomerate, you're going to be paying more in NI, which is confusing. Actually, a few economists have pointed out already that it might have been simpler to just raise income tax across the board. On that, she said that income tax thresholds will not be frozen past 28-29, which means more money in your back pocket, no more stealth tax. She's also said day-to-day spending for departments is going to be slimmed down to 2% by 2%.
2%.
So that's the austerity part of this budget that we've been talking about. We've also heard that fuel duty will stay frozen next year, even though that's going to cost £2 to £3 billion, which is shocking when you consider that they have just dropped bus fares, which were capped at £2. They've raised that right back up to £3. We also heard about stamp duty. First-time buyers are not going to pay any extra stamp duty, but buy-to-let landlords will have to pay an extra 2%, which might discourage them. Any second homes, this is actually. Would you like anything else?
I think that's a pretty
That was comprehensive.
exemplary summation. What a consummate professional she is, Ed Campbell.
Well, no, I did
but
say
I don't best
assets
efforts.
asses earlier, didn't I?
You did say asses.
You did say asses.
What a tax on asses? A donkey
A
tax.
tax on the
Why was
bunda.
I talking about asses?
Yeah, you were talking about the new debt rules.
Oh,
Her investment rule for
Yeah.
accounting for the value of investment and assets on government borrowing. Ed,
Yes.
what's your view of all this? How do you feel?
How do I
Do you feel richer?
I'm so worried about the fiscal drag. That was.
I wake in the night covered in sweat.
But she's got rid of the fiscal.
No,
drag.
so I'm
Eventually,
delighted.
yeah.
I'm delighted. It's just if they nail the messaging of this, obviously business and rich people will have their backs up slightly about the notion that they might have to contribute something. So if they get the messaging right, I think the Labour government have firmly put themselves on the side of working people here. I think
Yes.
absolutely.
Yes.
They made their position very clear, despite all the kowtowing to the courting of big business that we've seen when they were in opposition and recently. They have really put themselves on the side of the workers, which is quite a stark contrast.
But at the expense, actually, of public spending. If you look at that 2% cap, the 2% reduction that they're going to put on departments, those departments have got to pay these public sector pay increases that have been granted over the past couple of months. They've got to find the money for that. So that's going to affect their day-to-day spending. I don't know how they're going to... So they're going to have to make cuts elsewhere, aren't they?
22 billion for the NHS. Was it within 10 years, day-to-day spending? 22 billion pound increase. That's a pretty significant increase in funding. 3 billion for capital investment in the NHS as well. And
schools.
farms, inheritance tax as well, didn't we? Farms over 75 acres. So she's basically destroying sort of the handing down of farms.
But the problem was, as we said before, is that people were using that as a loophole. So she's changed. She's tightened the rules on inheritance tax. You'll get 325k tax-free, 500k if it's a residence, £1 million to tax-free if you've got a surviving spouse. I think that seems reasonable. £1 million tax-free.
Yeah.
Inheritance tax-free. Excuse me.
The simple fact is, like, the vast majority of family farms in this country are more than 75 acres. And if people have to break up and sell their estates, sell their grounds to pay those tax charges, you are just going to see fewer and fewer farmers in this country.
And you wonder what that is. Do you think that, not to be too cynical, but do you think that is a succession of governments that have turned their back on farmers because it's very expensive, because they have to subsidise the farming, since we're not in Europe anymore.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's not particularly profitable. You could argue, sorry, like don't shout at me, but you could argue that it's bad for the environment, and you could argue that a lot of that land could be used for homes or for wind farms or solar farms. I'm not saying I think any of these things. I'm asking, do you think that it's intentional?
Your point about the environment is absolutely correct, right? Like, the way that we do agriculture in this country is industrialised monoculture. So, let's say you have a family farm of 600 acres. All your 600 acres are most likely oilseed rape, maybe a bit of wheat. That's not good for the environment. And it is expensive, and we do subsidise it now. The problem with a lot of those subsidies is that, essentially, once you get so inordinately wealthy, if you have several thousand acres, you basically never have to work a day again in your life. The guys who own the sort of lords who own these estates up in Scotland, the government literally pays them, north of £1 million, depending on the size of the estate, a year for sort of rewilding projects and such. So once you get enough land, the government basically keeps you in riches for the future. All of your points about agriculture are valid. Like, we need to look at regenerative farming. We need to look at agroforestry. We need to change the way that we produce food in this country. The way that we've approached it so far is we impose pretty high standards on British farmers so far, whether that's the use of pesticides and fertilisers when they're growing arable crops, whether it's in terms of animal welfare if they're livestock farmers.
The type of tractor that they can drive as well.
And the problem is, if you're then happy to import, let's say, beef from Australia, where animal welfare standards are dramatically lower than they are here in the UK, you're essentially driving British farmers out of business, right? Because you're imposing like a punitive regulation system. And by the way, I'm very in favour of animal welfare standards because it's important, right? We take care of animals. But if you then accept the foreign good because it's cheaper, it's like, well, what the fuck how is the British farmer meant to compete with that?
Oh, what was the point of keeping that cow happy?
Yes, exactly. And look, at the end of the day, you put, again, you're right. Onshore wind, housing, all of these things are true. I think in an increasingly globalized world with the potential to kind of come unstuck by these black swan events, be they pandemics, terror attacks, wars, not having a sort of sovereign food supply is a very dangerous strategic mistake.
Well, especially when you twin it with their language on GB Energy, because the entire reason that they've been pushing that project expediting the bill even, is that, global headwinds, Ukraine or whatever. And the entire argument was you need to have some kind of sovereign energy that you can can use. You don't want to be dependent.
Well, yes, like energy security, right? And
sure,
food security is the equivalent thing there.
But then look, what do you do?
Absolutely.
One of the interesting things that a farmer was talking to me about on that protest that I went to a few months ago.
Oh yeah, the tractors in Westminster. Yeah,
sick
that was good.
They were saying that the cost for them to provide. So if you go and buy a punnet of raspberries in Waitrose, he specifically said Waitrose, a British raspberry punnet will be next door to a South African raspberry punnet, and there's no discernible difference apart from the stamp on them that says where they're from. Most shoppers aren't really looking at that. They're just looking at, is the raspberry good? But it's cost them so much more, British farmers, to produce those raspberries because of the type of vehicle they have to have, which has to be ergonomic. It can't be a fuel-guzzling huge tractor.
Yeah, there are regulations about the type of fuel they can use,
Pesticides, all of these sorts of things.
Fertilisers.
But in South Africa, they can do whatever they like.
Yep.
The only thing they've got to pay for is the air to get them over here. And actually, by the time you've driven it down here, from wherever your farm is, it works out the same.
Really interesting, actually. I've just finished reading Frostbite by Nicola Twilley, and a lot of this produce is actually freight in boats. It depends on the product. Some things they do fly them around. Bits of seafood, other things and pieces.
How the hell are they keeping that raspberry fresh all the way from South Africa up here?
Yeah, it's fascinating. Different fruits require different, so it's a combination of temperature control and atmosphere control. So, and you can't do the same thing for like different fruits. So for example, when you have like a bag of salad, like a mixed leaf salad that you buy in the supermarket, the plastic of that bag has been designed in a specific way with different layers of semi-permeable membranes to allow different gases through at different rates, because the spinach, the rocket and the lettuce that are in that bag all decompose at different rates in exposure to different gases. So, for example, if you keep apples near potatoes, the gas that you would use, whose name escapes me, I think it might be nitrogen.
Oh, so
I might be
the
wrong.
sarcopod.
Very much like the sarcopod, yeah. That would preserve the apple, causes the potato to chit and those little spuds to come off. So you have to keep things separate. If you eat an apple in July, it was harvested in November. They preserve it the whole way through.
That's incredible.
You're lying.
No. Well, that's how apple trees work, right? They fruit once a year. They harvest them.
Fruit once a year. You sound like Jordan Peterson.
But fire is a predator!
They fruit once a year. Do you think was this an optimistic budget?
Yes.
I think it was quite optimistic.
I do think it is optimistic.
Yeah, I think there's been a lot of doom and gloom about this budget, and I think this might
we're
have.
addicted to doom and gloom.
Yeah, I think we are. And someone made the point. I think it was my boy Duncan Robinson, that people are approaching this Labour government in the same way that they approached the Tories.
Despair.
In that outrage.
Yeah.
Outrage at whatever they've announced. So he specifically made the point about people are talking about Suella Braverman's attacks on the rights of protesters in the same way that they're now talking about a 1% to 2% increase on national insurance contributions. There is just like, people are still so in this attack mindset of whatever the government doing is absolutely outrageous and must be attacked
Resisted.
and deconstructed.
Yeah.
I don't think that Rishi needed to blow up the way he did. I mean, that was a bit much, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I've never seen him speak in that way before.
Yeah.
Genuinely.
Rent was due. That's what they say online.
Like, that's the cash was there.
Yeah.
That was all the land. Do you think it was a whip round? Do you think it was a whip round for him leaving?
Yeah, that's very funny.
I think this is the first step, right? To borrow the Labour lexicon. The view on a lot of this stuff won't materialise for years, particularly the capital investment project. It's a start. It's a start. It's tax with a view to growing the economy and then hopefully being able to spend a bit more. But, as Ava mentioned there, with departmental budget cuts, spending cuts, we're not out of the woods yet.
One thing I think was interesting, I'm sorry, I said this to you before the podcast recorded as well, so you're going to be really bored of hearing about it. But changing the fiscal rules is very interesting because if you look at something like the Office for Value for Money, right, which Labour want to make more use of, or they want to be more, they want to please them more perhaps than previous administrations. When you look at something like student debt, right, student debt that was worth £3.5 billion was sold off at £1.7 billion, and that happens all the time with any kind of government procurement or government contract. Something is always undersold because I don't know where they hire the negotiators from, but
I think people see the government coming a mile off.
But then when you've changed exactly. But when you change the fiscal rules in this way, then there's more of a need for you to get value for money, right? Because you're actually unlocking spending potential. So for example, the land that was bought during HS2 that now needs to be sold back to those people. For months, transport journalists have been saying they're going to sell that back at a loss. There's now a clear incentive for the government to sell that at market value or above, like a normal person would, because that's spending power for you.
You mentioned the Office for the Value of Money and HS2. Whilst we were listening there, I think we saw on Twitter that the head of the Office for Value for Money also sits on the board of HS2.
Well, he knows what bad value is then.
Yes, that can inform his decisions. Yeah,
experience.
So that's why they should appoint Michelle Mone as the COVID commissioner.
Yeah, she knows what bad looks like.
Yeah,
and Harold Shipman as health secretary.
Is he dead?
Shipman's dead, isn't he?
I don't know actually. I don't really remember Harold Shipman. I just remember I just know who he is.
That's why. But I got Fred West to do my patio.
I'm pretty sure he's dead.
Yeah.
You guys haven't done
20 years ago.
We've not done a podcast this week, have we?
No. We've been building up to this one.
So we didn't talk about Tony Hinchcliffe at the Trump rally.
We didn't.
That was absolutely extraordinary.
I also went over to the guys earlier whilst you were out, and
whilst you were out, as if you've just been like.
I was doing fucking work.
Yeah.
Well, you've not
the landlord convention.
Yes, but at Twitter you weren't like, great, nice work, Ed.
Right.
You should tweet like it's my annual review, I think.
Yes, yeah.
Sorry.
Revealing. The Trump support amongst Latino voters increases in areas where the white people that live there don't use the word Latino and refer to them as Latinx. So the Latinos, if the white people around them are calling them Latinx, they're like, fuck this.
It's like too woke.
Utter woke nonsense.
Yeah.
Trump. Which made me laugh.
Yeah.
What do you want to say about Tony Hinchcliffe?
I have quite a high tolerance for like
racism.
As a white man, I have quite a high tolerance for offensive comedy, but I think there's a real difference to taking that out with the confines of a comedy club and
putting it on a political rally,
a political rally where Trump is railing about the enemy within.
Someone tweeted it possibly. I think it was a comedian tweeted. Apparently, he tried it out at a comedy club a few weeks ago, didn't get a laugh. Thought, don't worry about it. I'm just going to do it over here.
I need a captive audience.
Yeah.
Holy shit.
They'll laugh. We've been going for about an hour and 20 minutes, so unless there's anything else you guys want to add, God, the chamber's empty now, isn't it? There's anything else you guys want to add or discuss?
I was at the Tommy Robinson rally.
2 hours and 20 minutes.
We've been going for 2 hours, 20 minutes.
It's an extra hour there.
Good Lord.
I know her. I know her. Okay then, Ed. You're at the Tommy Robinson.
I was at Tommy Robinson rally.
Demo on Saturday.
I think that's an existential threat to the Labour Party, or it's a real reminder to the Labour Party of the challenge that they're facing.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, this is it, right? It's that
This is it.
the budget and the stakes could not be higher. Like, the Labour Party essentially has one term to succeed.
Yep.
And if they fail,
there's a crisis in democracy.
Yeah,
and faith in institutions.
It's reform, and it's the Tommy lot, right? It's the hard right that stands to benefit.
Oh, they've got 5 years to do it, and though. Perhaps we do need to be a bit more sanguine. Take the venom out a bit of politics.
But then
perhaps it's just not as knife edge as we're used to.
But then the people on the other side are using that language of they're trying to sow distrust in these institutions. So I think there is, if the other side is not playing fair, then you really need to go on the offensive.
But that's why I always respected Liz Truss, because she was such a maniac that she would have a go at people who were meant to be on her side. I thought that, when she was like the bloated civil service, just as she was putting out her budget that the civil service obviously had to implement.
Yep.
It was like, I love it. Why bite the hand that feeds you when you can eat the entire arm?
I think your point's valid, Ed. I would just probably gently counter that they're not the only people, as in the sort of hard right sort of groups that are coalescing and demonstrating on days like the Tommy protest. They're not the only people that are sowing distrust.
Oh, no.
Right?
Robert Jenrick's doing it.
Robert Jenrick's doing it. The Labour Party's doing it. It's... Okay, to take the budget, for example, right? Where in the Labour Party manifesto did they say we would cut the winter fuel payment and that we would increase taxes by £40 billion? They didn't. Now, obviously, there are political arguments around that.
I think that's different thing to making a dog whistle attack against there's been a cover-up. I think that is. I think they are very different things.
I totally disagree.
Really?
I think if you campaign in a general election, you tell the country that you're going to do one thing, i.e., what starts out as we're not going to raise taxes, and then that develops into we won't raise the three main taxes on working people, and then you go and do what they have done today. People who dislike this form of economics, I think fairly, and winter fuel payment is another example, can say, you didn't tell us you were going to do this. And the fact that you are now doing it, what is your mandate for doing it? Like that is quite literally how people end up not trusting politicians. You didn't tell me you're going to do this, and now you've done this. You made these extraordinary changes.
But in their defence, if they'd said anything about putting taxes up before, I mean, even like when some of those bits got leaked to the media, people were out there cashing in their pensions. They were selling off anything that could possibly be have capital gains added to it. You could say. Perhaps they didn't want to spook the market. Perhaps the invisible hand.
I do think that's such a different thing from Robert Jenrick being prepared to suggest like a shadowy cabal has covered something up. I think that it's a much more egregious thing to play with that side of politics. As if a party hasn't been electioneering in their manifesto. I think that is a false equivalency.
Ah, right, okay. Well, I was prepared to agree with you up to a point, but to say it's a false equivalency is like, no. Like, you're right, invoking, well, sort of leaning into conspiracy theories, right?
Yeah.
It's bad and it's sort of extreme. And and it sort of is quite, the magnitude of that as sort of a political lie that you're prepared to tell is significant, because the sort of the people who are inclined to believe it are at the more extreme ends of the political spectrum. And there's I guess there's an order of magnitude difference here between your sort of median voter, regular person, who, when Robert Jenrick says there's a shadowy cabal of interests that are preventing you from knowing X, Y, or Z, median voter goes, that sounds a little bit like a conspiracy theory to me, as opposed to the kind of lower grade, but sort of more mass market of dishonest election campaign feeding into pretty extraordinary fiscal decisions being made by the government. In the same way, and like this trend in turnout goes back to the 80s and the early 90s, where you see traditional Labour voters failing to turn out and vote for the Labour Party since the Labour Party's moved to the centre. And it's kind of, they both have net negative effects on trust in politics in very different ways. But the sort of, I guess I would call it, more standard political approach of electioneering is probably the most polite way of putting it, or dishonesty is another. Sort of the net impact of that on trust in politics is also significant.
I think they're both significant. I think one's way worse.
Why?
Because I think the Labour Party aren't actively turning people against democratic institutions, aren't turning people against the legal process, aren't turning people against the institutions that make up the state and require people to trust them. If you have someone who believes, well, like being leader of the Conservative Party is an incredibly mainstream political position, you're bringing that into the mainstream. If you're prepared to stand there and say that and you feel comfortable doing that as somebody who wants to be the leader of the opposition, even as an MP, I think it speaks to you are making those arguments much more palatable. So he said it, and now other Conservatives...
Lending credibility.
Yeah, that's what it is. Oh, you're taking the arguments that are made by Tommy Robinson, and you're giving them the acceptability of a Conservative MP standing in Parliament saying that, commenting on a live legal case. It's dog whistle politics, and it's dangerous. People, because that comment that will be shared by all the channels that share all of Tommy Robinson's stuff.
But I do understand the point that a lie, no matter what it's about, has the potential to fuel that. If you look at what those channels are saying about, the right-wing channels are saying about the winter fuel allowance, it's on a par with that. It fuels it.
Yeah. They affect it in different ways, I think.
A lie is a lie.
Yeah.
Anyway, guys, listen. We've got 4.5 hours to buy fags.
Stock up.
There's going to be a raid on the tobacco market.
Yeah, there's going to be a run.
You and the
fags.
offie.
I'm going to go see Mo around the corner.
You're off to College Green?
Yes, I am. Thank you for giving away my location.
Sorry, terrible OPSEC.
Yeah, that's cool.
You're interviewing MPs. I'm interviewing Grace Blakely and Ed Campbell.
Look, he'll be here interviewing Grace Blakely.
Yes. Yeah, I'll be here.
Who won't be here?
Me.
Where are you going to be?
In the office. Do my...
editing your landlord piece.
My landlord video.
Yeah, this is actually Ollie's living room.
Yeah. Ollie makes us come to his flat.
to record the podcast.
To record. It's really far away from the office. That's why we're so late.
Cracking. Everyone happy?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. I think we might do some more live things in the future.
I think we go full live PMQs every Wednesday.
Yeah, why not?
Drop a comment if you'd be back.
Drop a comment if you enjoyed it, crucially.
I think as an audio product, it's probably tough.
Probably a slightly tough listen, yeah, it's going backwards and forwards. But
not a tough watch, am I right, fellas? Not with you here, Ed.
When we start doing the Patreon feet tier of a camera below the desk.
Oh, of our
foot cam.
Yeah.
Foot cam. Right, crack-a-lackin'. A new dawn has broken. Thank you for watching. We'll see you soon.
Bye-bye.